Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Hang Up right here on the line. I'm at Dillahunty. What am I hung up on this week? Well, I don't know. Are students still having problems at universities? I'm looking to support secular students. And as such, I've been a part of or supportive of the Secular Student Alliance for years. I was on and I guess I'm still on the Secular Student Alliance Speakers Bureau. I've gone to several of the conventions. They're actually some of my favorites, though I haven't had the chance to go in a while. Of course, the pandemic and other things have put a dent into a lot of things, not just atheist conventions in general, but SSA conventions and stuff. But universities are a kind of a unique space. And I didn't go to university. When I turned 18, I joined the Navy, and it was its own rude awakening. But university is a place that are often vilified by religious organizations because this is where they're liberalizing our kids. We send our kids off to these universities, and these liberal professors turn them into somebody we don't even recognize. That's long been the refrain of the religious right in particular. Now they've shifted it to claiming that when you send your students to school, they're going to get transgender operations and get sent back, and you really won't recognize them, because what they're really afraid of is change and anybody standing up for who they are and standing up in opposition to the assertions of the religious community. It turns out that an accurate education and exposure to the broad realities of the world can change people if they're not always also surrounded by forces bent on confounding them and forcing them to stay in line with particular doctrine. The freedom to live and think and to care about people that you've never met is really expressed for the first time for many people when they go to university. As I mentioned, I went in the Navy. It's a bit more harsh, but it's a similarly challenging environment. I moved beyond my family and my church to truly interact with and see people and ideas that I was unfamiliar with for the first time. Students in universities have a lot of pressure. They are the customer, although it's never going to feel like that, because they're footing the bill for the education in one way or another. Either they earned a scholarship, or they've taken out crippling student loans, or their family, whatever. They are still the customer. And yet they are also, in a way, the product of the university. They're the ones that are expected to succeed. They're expected to study and learn, and then take what they learn and go out and make the world a good place. And religions have consistently co-opted ideas of community and morality and education, because a lot of universities have been created by religions, as have a lot of hospitals. Anytime somebody goes down the religion is all bad pipeline, I like to remind them that while the religion is bad, religious people have done and continue to do mountains of good, including hospitals and areas of or educational facilities of higher learning. But that doesn't mean there's not room for improvement, both in the hospitals and in the universities. There are hospitals that have terrible policies because they're run and owned and run by Catholics. And so it changes what someone who comes in and has a miscarriage has to go through, because it adds religious doctrine to the medical science. Similarly, students in universities, in addition to all the pressure they're under, are often marginalized unless they are part of one of the popular nominally Christian organizations. This is the time when they are often out from underneath their parents' watchful eyes for extended periods for the very first time in their lives, many of them. They're meeting people with different beliefs about any issue you can imagine. They're meeting people from different backgrounds with different beliefs on different issues and different bank accounts. There's often a class and culture shock when you head off to university. And it might be their first time meeting people with different races, religions, sexual orientations, genders, political views. Christian organizations in particular have hugely preferential treatment on college campuses much of the time. Christian speakers can be paid extremely well by Cru, the most absurd and ridiculous name that Campus Crusade for Christ came up with to sound edgy and cool. And churches also contribute, and they can put on huge events on campus. In fact, I would estimate that nearly half of the times I've spoken or debated on campus a religious organization was involved and primarily involved, and their representative was given a love offering or an honorarium, a full order of magnitude greater than my honorarium. Just a fact. Religious campus groups thrive, and they stay alive because they have a constant stream of external support from local churches and national organizations. This is where something like the Secular Student Alliance comes in, because I've helped with a number of different SSA groups, and it is difficult to keep groups going depending on where you are on the college campus. Matter of fact, my number one recommendation is for every SSA group to make their leadership sophomores and juniors, so that they are around for 1 or 2 years, maybe longer if they're doing grad school at the same place, to be a living memory, an institutional memory and support for the ones that are coming up, the freshmen and sophomores and juniors that are coming in to take over, so the groups continue. Secular student groups don't have the advantages that Christian groups do. Unfortunately, I've even seen Muslim campus groups that are better funded and better supported in the United States than the SSA groups. Now, we are closing in on doing some fundraising support, and I haven't had enough involvement with the SSA for the past few years, so it's time to bring in someone who understands the SSA much better than I do. Tonight's guest, please welcome her. Dr. Kristina Lee earned her doctorate in communication studies from Colorado State University in 2022. She's the vice chair of the board of directors for the Secular Student Alliance, and the SSA's mission is to empower secular students to proudly express their identity, build welcoming communities, promote secular values, and set a course for lifelong activism, which is something we'll get back to in a minute. Kristina and I don't know each other very well. She may, in fact, be hot buttered awesome, but I already know that she's at least regular awesome. Welcome, Kristina. How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm exhausted and great and terrified and tired and just, I can't wait for this election to be over.
Yes, that is definitely fair. I teach political communication, and I think all of my students are ready for the election to be over too.
I have more lessons to learn in political communication because it's funny watching. You never know when people are calling in, and we may get calls like this tonight. By the way, this, like all the shows on the line's a call-in show, and after Kristina and I are done having a good talk here, we are hoping that people will call in. And if you are a member of a Secular Student Alliance organization somewhere, now is your opportunity to call in and represent your group, as well as get a chance to talk to the vice chair, and to let the rest of us know what's going on with you. But when people call in, I have no way of knowing if they're being serious, or if, am I got Russian trolls calling in to try to convince, left voters to not vote or to vote third party because it all works towards the goal. It's exhausting. So I'm kind of hoping to set some of the election stuff aside tonight, because we're going to be doing a live show about it soon. Tell me what's going on with the Secular Student Alliance right now.
Yeah, so right now, we're still kind of recovering from COVID, getting a lot of organizations back, which has been really good. We've actually had a lot of growth. We've seen a lot of comeback. But I mean, across the board, you're seeing a lot of clubs struggling with the leadership component of students not having that experience as much. So it's a lot of teaching students how to run an organization. We have a lot of really cool projects going on. One of my favorites is we are doing a spring break trip that's charity focused. So really trying to get secular students involved in helping communities in need. We have our conference every year. We do some really cool webinars, a lot of them focused on the election, and our students getting involved in politics. And then we're also hosting a fundraiser next month on the 16th. That's going to be a 24-hour one with a whole bunch of different secular atheist YouTubers coming on and sharing their thoughts and getting more people aware of SSA. Awesome.
It is it's a frustrating thing because, the pandemic put a dent in everybody, and or all of our actions, but also we were already hitting probably some version of critical mass on how many atheist and secular conventions and gatherings and meetups we could do, given all of the other things people are working on. There was a clear, strong heyday that a couple of years after 9/11 started building. And, you know, there were years where I was doing a convention every month, in addition to debates, in addition to hosting a weekly call-in show, in addition to podcasts and whatever else. Now, I don't do anywhere near as many conventions, like maybe 2 or 3 a year at most for the last few years. Actually, didn't do any in after COVID started. But it's been a few years since I started with the SSA, and I know that, like any group, they've been struggling, as all of us have. But lately, when I talk to people, secularity seems to have moved to a lower rung on my personal ladder and on many people's ladder than sanity and security. It's like the world is such a mess now that, how much effort should we be putting into secular issues? And my take has been that, we can do both. I mean, and in some cases we may need both. But what are you seeing from students as we, kind of rebuild? Is there still an issue where students need extra support, feeling comfortable, even being who they are on campus?
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely a great point. And yeah, I think that is one thing that students are really drawn to SSA for, is because they are trying to find spaces where they can be their authentic selves. And for many of our students, they have had to hide their identity, or maybe they come from a secular family, but they come onto campus and is trying to find people who have similar views as them. And they're trying to find that space they can be their authentic selves. And then what's, I think, really cool about SSA is we really give the students, depending on the chapter, the power to do what they need to do. So a lot of our students, for example, in like the Northeast part of the country, they're a lot more involved in, we want to do secular political activism. So you see a lot more kind of intersectionality in terms of what types of issues we're looking at. A lot of students are involved in anything from environmentalism as well as LGBTQ plus
Right.
kind of issues being tied into secularism, where a lot of our students in, for example, the Bible Belt are more, we just need a space where we can safely be ourselves. And the organizations and the different clubs really shape their own identities depending on the needs of the people in the different parts of the country. And so that's definitely that we're seeing quite often is students trying to figure out what are the needs of local chapter members. And not all the members always agree. And then them trying to navigate, figuring out what's best for us. And as a national chapter, trying to support all of them and all their different needs. It's always a challenge, but our director, Kevin, is amazing at trying to help every student on their individual level if they're trying to start a chapter and needing help.
So basically, it sounds like student groups are dealing with all the same issues that all the other groups are doing, in addition to the pressures and complications of being at university. Because in organizations, I'm on the board of directors for American Atheists, and I'm an advisor for some other groups. But there's constantly, like, ooh, what's mission creep? How much should we focus on LGBTQ issues? How much should we focus on climate change issues? Should we only focus on church-state separation? And when I say we, I'm talking about the organizations that I've worked with over the years. We supported SSA groups, and sometimes it feels like we have to start over every couple of years. I mentioned that briefly in the opening. How do you recommend that SSA groups keep going in an environment where people are graduating and leaving a vacuum?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that's just really important is kind of with any type of club and organization is creating rituals, creating what are the types of activities we want to do, whether it's an annual fundraiser, an annual charity event, whatever that might be, a debate, bringing people onto campus so that they can have these conversations. I know when I was in SSA, we got involved with having conversations with some of the Christian groups on campus that weren't designed to be debates. They were designed to be conversations. And I always enjoyed those conversations. And so I think, again, each group needs to figure out what's the need for the students in that area, but having those kind of, we can do these things every year to keep momentum going and then try new things, see what sticks. But then I think we also always need leadership training and making sure that students can learn how to run an organization and keep that going on in their life after college, because there's a lot of research that suggests that being in clubs is a really good thing for democracy in general. And so keeping that activism going after college is really helpful. So we're really hoping that we can continue to encourage that. As you've mentioned, I feel like a lot of students are pulled in a lot of different directions and feel like they have to choose where to put their energy. And so trying to help articulate why secularism is so important. And from my perspective, it's so closely tied to so many other issues. I study Christian nationalism in my research, and Christian nationalism oftentimes is used not only to promote very particular conservative Christian values that can impose on all people, but that impacts, of course, atheists, but religious minorities. It impacts all these other issues from abortion, reproduction access, LGBTQ plus. And we can just keep looking at all of these things. And so secularism is so important for protecting other areas. And that's something we really try to encourage our students to understand.
And by the way, I had said when we talked the other day, I'd said I was going to do this, but I forgot, and then you forgot. You are here in your official capacity as one thing and not anything else. So why don't you fill us all in?
It's always good to clarify. I am a professor at the University of South Dakota, but anytime I talk about my research or my position at SSA, I like to emphasize I'm talking about my own professional opinion on issues as well as personal experience. I do not represent the University of South Dakota or the South Dakota Board of Regents. We always like to have those clarifications anytime any kind of professor is talking about their research in a public forum. But thank you for giving that opportunity to clarify that.
It's the same kind of disclaimer we have to do when I have lawyer friends who come on the show and they're like, I'm not giving you legal advice. And then there are doctors that come on the show. And even we like I had Dr. Angie on a couple of times. We talked about COVID and vaccines and distancing and all that stuff. And, you've got to constantly remind people, yes, Dr. Angie's a real doctor and an emergency room doctor. And she is most definitely super hot buttered awesome. And I can't wait to get her back on the show again, but she's not here giving official medical advice as well. And you know what? I love that I don't ever have to say that because I'm not an expert in anything. I don't represent anybody but me. And anybody who hasn't figured that out after 20 years, probably just not paying attention. One of the problems, and I mentioned the Speakers Bureau earlier. It's still on the website. I'm still listed there as well. But one thing I found in the many times that I went and spoke at universities, the students enjoyed it. And, I also did some other things. I, did kind of like a magic and skepticism thing for a couple of them. But student groups are lectured all the time. Maybe bringing in some erudite philosopher or professor or dipshit like me to come in and give a lecture on something isn't the best way to attract people to the SSA. I would think one thing students like is food and pizza socials and things like that. Granted, I wasn't a student. I could be wrong. What types of things have you guys seen are actually encouraging people to participate? Because you've got to get the conversation started. If I'm a secular student and you're a secular student and we don't know each other and we never interact, even if we're standing out there protesting, there's nothing to get us talking about how we can work together. So what sort of SSA events have been, successful at getting people encouraged and inspired to participate and keep participating?
Yeah, one, we love having you on campuses, and our students love it. So I think having people come on is always a really cool draw to bring more attention. But I do think that, food is always helpful, but to a large extent, it is kind of having those opportunities to build connections. So to me, some of my favorite is when I see groups that are doing things like charity work. And they're, doing something in their communities, whether it's garbage pickups or maybe having multiple people come to the conference together and being able to come as a team. We've had a couple of chapters who have responded to political issues on campus. Last year, when we had a president who banned a drag show on campus and used his personal religion to argue it, the Secular Student Alliance stepped up to work on protesting that. And that really brought a lot of students together and being able to, again, kind of figure out what is it that your individual chapter needs, but hosting events or regular things that bring people together so that they can either have conversations or feel like they're making a difference in their communities or through intellectual conversations, whatever it is that those groups are, those individual chapters are needing.
I'm, by the way, we're going to be moving on to calls here in a little while. I got a couple more questions, and I also want to give you some time just to cover all the things that I'm not even qualified to remember to think of asking. But in the SSA, I think one of the key factors that I look for, if the goal is to create secular activists, do you know what percentage of the and you don't have to do a calculation, but you're former SSA. What percentage of the board are SSA activists that were created through the Secular Student Alliance anyway?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, historically, our board was predominantly student members, former student members. Now we've kind of shifted a little bit away from having a lot of students on our board, which is something I think we're always having conversations of how to change that. But we always have 2 student members on our team. So we always have the student perspective on the team. I'm a former member. There was another person who just left the board who'd been a member for a long time. But right now, a lot of the people who are joining the Secular Student Alliance board in particular are people who oftentimes went to college before SSA became a thing. And their sentiment is, I wish I'd had something like this,
right?
Because it would have made a really big difference. And so that's kind of what we're starting to see more people join the board or who are applying to our board positions. But I think it's really important to us that we continue to develop that pipeline. So our board is a combination of people who were in SSA and are continuing that activism, as well as people who are joining the secular movement and viewing the idea of supporting students as a great place to put our focus, because the reality is the movement won't continue as a whole if we don't have younger people involved. And it's incredibly important to support students, many students who, like you mentioned, for the first times have left their home. This is when they start to question religion or feel free to do so. And making sure that students have a space to go to is really important. I know I was on the SSA in grad school, but I had started questioning religion when I was in middle school. But by the time I went to college is when I was really questioning things. And I don't believe that I'm aware of, my school did not have an SSA, but it had a lot of religious groups. And as I was questioning things, I went to those religious groups to find answers. And it so happened that they weren't persuasive for me. But I think it's just having the option to be able to find a group that says, hey, you're questioning, we have a place that you can do that and do it safely is really, really important. And so hopefully I think having that, and then those students being able to have a space to continue working, whether it's through SSA or similar organizations, is really important.
I think it's one of the, granted, to be fair, I've had some sort of beard for years and it's always been gray. But when Arden was like, no, grow the beard out. Let's see if we can make you look basically older. I'm basically cribbing my deceased friend James Randi, which I get all the time as an atheist and a magician. The beard's there, but it's also to remind people, hi students, I love coming to campuses and interacting with folks, and I like doing lectures and debates and magic shows and all that stuff. And I know that I look incredibly young for my age, and there's barely a line, and I might get a chance to live for a long time. But I've also done this for 20 years. And while I hope to do it for another 20 years, I need some of you to get involved and stay involved so that you can be more relevant than me, because I've had multiple heart attacks and a triple bypass already, despite the fact that I'm only 55. So I could croak really soon. I might not be here to take calls. And I need people who went through the Secular Student Alliance to get involved in this, come in, send a message, do some stuff on your own, and say, you know what, I've been producing a couple bits of YouTube content. Matt, can I come on and sit down with you and take calls from theists? And I'll be like, you bet. Because all I care about doing right now is continuing. Well, all right. From now till next week, all I care about is the election, but I'm going to pretend like I care about a few other things more than the election today. And one thing that I care more about today is getting SSA folks, getting the organizations built up so that I'm convinced there are on any given campus where there is an SSA group, there are far more people who would be members but don't know about it than are members. And the reason I suspect that is because that would mirror what we see in the fan base for the line, in the atheist, American atheist, who are members, who comes to conventions, who knows about what's going on, versus who's an atheist, who's eligible to come on. So I'm gonna stop here while we're starting to queue up some calls. By the way, the line is a call-in network, and this is a call-in show. And as always, theists will always have priority on every show that I do. And so if you're a theist that wants to call in, have nothing to do with Secular Student Alliance, and defend your beliefs, maybe you want to have a conversation with somebody other than me, and I would be happy to sit back and play a game of chess or take notes on something while you talk to Dr. Lee about your religious belief. But I'd also love to hear from, especially if you are one in the leadership of the SSA at your university. It is now October 30th. Hey, happy birthday, Beth. Today's my ex-wife's birthday. And so why not say so? It's also our former wedding anniversary. It's also the anniversary of the day I quit smoking. So October 30th is a good day. I already got all my work done for today. But there are student groups that are getting ready to start gearing up for finals and preparations to go home and visit family. And it might be nice to hear how your time with the SSA or the early fall semester is going to impact what sort of interactions you're likely to have when you get home. I think those would be interesting discussions. But while I'm queuing up calls and everything, I want to give an opportunity to Kristina to give all the thoughts about the SSA that she feels are important that I'm absolutely not going to ask about. So, how can people get involved? Why should they support? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think one of the things that's so important about the Secular Student Alliance is that its very existence disrupts so much of the Christian nationalism and Christonormativity in U.S. culture. And I think it's really interesting because as someone who studies Christian nationalism and the marginalization of atheists, you see a lot this rhetoric of, campuses are secular campuses. But part of that reality is that they're actually very multicultural campuses, and you have a lot of religious organizations. And even secular students sometimes have a hard time finding each other, in part because there's been a lot of pressure to hide their identities. And so much of the secular movement and the atheist movement as a whole, whatever term you prefer to use, it needs to create spaces where people feel comfortable being openly non-religious in a culture that really pressures people to hide their identity. That's a lot of the research I do, is looking at the ways that US culture pressures people to pretend to be religious when they're not. And so I think the Secular Student Alliance is so important because it creates that space to disrupt that and let students know it's okay to question your religion. It's okay to not be religious. You're still a moral person. You're still a good person. You can still be involved in charity work and all these other things. And here's all of these other resources to help you dig deeper into that questioning or getting more out of your secular identity. And I think that's what's so important. And so we definitely encourage students. We have chapters in elementary, middle, high school, colleges, grad students have chapters. So you can get involved at any level if you're interested. We have some amazing staff at SSA who help students get started, helping you figure out what is your chapter looking for? What are the needs of students on your university, and how might they be different from other campuses? And even if you're no longer a student and you're like a lot of our members of the board who are just like, this would have been helpful for me, if you're able to donate, of course that's helpful, but you can also join our board. We're always looking for new members. We'll have applications for our new board memberships in the spring. And even if you can't donate or can't get involved in that way, just spreading awareness, just so people know we exist, is really, really helpful.
It's one of the things I constantly reminded people of when I was with ACA and AA and others, is I'm the fortunate front-facing component of a huge machine supported by just countless people. I mean, it's Wednesday night, and there are going to be thousands of people who tune in over the next couple of hours to watch what's going on. And for some reason, people think this is activism. And it is to some extent. Don't get me wrong. Getting the word out is important. Having the arguments, the discussions and debates is important. Creating and entertaining, hopefully, educational, much more hopefully, a platform where we get guests on like you to talk about things and keep people interested and everything else. That's all important. But every week when we did events that people would come to for social stuff, we needed people to post flyers. We need people to set up chairs. We need people to clean up afterwards. We need people with expertise in finances to, be the treasurer, work with the treasurer. We need people in pretty much a bizarre collection of areas of expertise because of what we're doing. We need people who are experts on speaking, people who are experts on law, people who are experts on nonprofit organizations and promoting. We need people who are experts in getting donors. I'm the worst. To the extent that I ever failed any organization, it was about not asking for enough money. And a good chunk of it is that a lot of the atheist community is coming from a church community where the hat is passed all the time. Time to put your money in the offering, time to put your money in the offering. And people want to get away from that. And it feels too much like church, and it feels too much like, ooh, you're passing the plate. You're just like them. And so I bought into that to some extent and avoided it on some occasions. And the reality is, we need your money. We need all your money. You need to give all of your money. Give not till it hurts. Give till it hurts. Give till it feels good. Give till it hurts again, and then whatever. Because we're not just. It's not just about, oh, we're going to keep Matt alive and in healthcare. It is. There are people out there who have no idea that any of this is going on. Doesn't matter if I sit down with Jordan Peterson and it gets 1 million views, or I sit down with, Harris or somebody and it's going to get 1 million views. None of that matters because it matters, but it's not enough, because there are billions of people on the planet, and there are tons of people who are desperately in need. There are students that need the SSA, just like there are people escaping religion who need the Freedom from Religion Foundation, who need recoveringfromreligion.org, who need American Atheists. They need landing places. And if there's not a community here to build landing places, we have failed. And one of the key things the SSA needs to do is not just draw in the students that are there and give them things to do, but to inspire them to keep being involved afterwards, because they are, oh my God, Matt, that sounds like indoctrination. That sounds like you're trying to create a bunch of people to mindlessly come over and keep managing this godless satanic machine that you're behind. No, it's a practical reality that we aren't funded the way religions are. We aren't funded the way churches are. We are not protected the way those organizations are. We are at odds with the world and with governments more often than not. And that means that people have to get involved. So we are going to read Super Chats tonight. You can feel free and donate. By the way, you can also go to linemerch.com and find merch there, including some brand new chewed gum merch. This network has call-in shows all week long, right now especially. Tonight's show is a hang up. It's myself and Dr. Lee. Tomorrow's a transatlantic call-in show. It's all about trans rights, trans activism. If you're a transphobe and you don't, and you want to brag about it, you can call in and talk to them. If you've been called a transphobe and you don't know why, you can call in and ask them. They might be able to explain it to you. If you're confused about gender issues and trans issues, there's an entire show dedicated to trying to help educate people. I don't have the list of who's on tomorrow, but I'm sure Arden can speak up real quick and tell me who's going to be on TACIS tomorrow, just like that.
Can we Josie and I again?
It's a miracle. The best producer on the planet. Josie and Arden will be hosting Transatlantic Call-In Show tomorrow. There's also going to be a couple Cus I Wannas this weekend. And then on Sunday, it'll be the Sunday show at 2 p.m. and the Sunday show after dark at 7 p.m. Next Monday will be Skeptalk. And next Tuesday will be Chewed Gum, which has new merchandise, which you can find at linemerch.com. What do you think, Kristina? You think we should take a call?
I'm open to it.
Okay, because I have a call for you, primarily from Max. Max is a theist, pronouns are he, him, and he says there's no need for SSA organizations in colleges. Max, how are you?
Good. Good evening to you guys. I'm good. Yeah, so when I was finishing my undergrad, I'm class of 2020. There is absolutely no, pressure to be, to talk about religion at all in class or in extracurriculars. In fact, the few programs that we had on campus, basically we're trying to, and failing to get enough people to show up. They were resorting to things like free lunches on Wednesdays for Catholics or some other nonsense like dormitory religious groups, stuff like that. And I have went to some of them, and the attendance was abysmal. So, for example, it was like 3 people organizing it, and maybe 2 or 3 would show up, and that would be a good night. And in terms of anything else, yeah.
We may have missed something. First of all, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind knowing, what university it was, but we don't have to, because so you have your lived experience at a single university, but you seem to think that the SSA isn't needed because religious organizations at the university you went to weren't very effective. But I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kristina, jump in here. We're not creating secular student organizations merely because there are religious organizations, right?
No, not simply because of that. I mean, that's certainly a part of it, is giving students options and making sure that they have those options. But it is about creating spaces where students can be their authentic selves.
Okay. Well, I don't mind telling you, I went to DePaul, and I would just like to say that, in my opinion, it's kind of like LGBT only spaces sort of thing. Like, you're trying to find a reason to be like prosecuted. Oh, there's like Christians, so let us try to.
I think you might have meant persecuted.
Prosecuted, yeah, whatever.
No, I think you mean persecuted.
Okay, persecuted, whatever.
Yeah. And I'm just double checking because nobody's going to jail over this. And are you saying that safe places for LGBTQ folks are also unnecessary?
I mean, if you go to like Liberty University or Birmingham Young University, I think they're warranted. But I think the universities that aren't going to allow them is where they're warranted, but other universities, they're not needed? I think so. If it's a regular school, state school, they're already not going to be this sort of animosity, especially at the university, where it's like people who are less backwards go.
My apologies, Max, because somebody's going to get irritated that I frame it this way, but I think it's completely fair. I'm going to guess that you're not only not a secular student, but you're not a member of the LGBTQIA students, right? So how do you know what protections someone in those classes might benefit from?
Well, because I attended the classes and I saw, there were LGBT students, there were, students of color there. And
I'm sorry, you might have misunderstood when I said the word class. I mean, I don't mean classes like you going into class. I mean, there's a class of people who are secular and there's a class of people who are queer, and you're not in either of those two groups. So how do you know what they need at a university?
Because I interact with them, and it's not like they're being persecuted for their identities. No one is going around saying, oh, look at this atheist, he's so weird. No one is going around saying, this queer that's so like lame. No one is doing that. People are very, keep to themselves in their own little cliques, and in a certain way, this special groups, especially for like people of color too, I think it just promotes this division.
So we don't need special groups for people of color either.
It should be all like integrated, like if there's like a dorm, if there's like 20% gay students at a school, each dorm should have 20% of gay students, so it's everyone can talk and everyone can learn from each other, and that will be the fastest way.
Dorms? I want Kristina to get in here, but I mean, you're saying so many things as asking questions. So I'm going to ask a question, but instead of you answering it, just think about it, and then I want Kristina to jump in here. The question that popped in my head is, are you suggesting that each dorm be demographically proportioned and represented according to some quota?
I think it would be nice. I think it would be a good idea to combat.
So you're in favor of quotas?
Yeah, I am.
Cool. Kristina, what do we know? Or
yeah, so I guess I do actually also have a clarifying question. So, saying that you don't think there should be these identity groups, do you think that also on college campuses there should not be any religious clubs or any clubs that are based off of someone's beliefs or identities or anything like that, just to clarify?
I think so, more so than not. I think if they want like a club for the Muslims, they can just go to their synagogue or their mosque. If they want a club for like Eastern Orthodox here in Chicago, they can just go to their Eastern Orthodox church. School should be like a place where you learn something, and that's how you interact. If you're like a business major, you go to a business major sorority or fraternity, or you join like a engineering club or something like rocketry club, right? Not based off of like, I'm black, let me go to a black house and just interact with black people all the time.
Well, I think I'm going to specifically focus on a couple of things. So the town that I live in, for example, is a town that's fairly small, and the only churches in town are Christian churches. So students who are Muslim don't have a place to go unless there's a club on campus. Oftentimes, especially for international students of any religion that's not Christian, there are limited options. And so having a space where students can meet with like-minded people to discuss issues that is important to them is, I think, really important. And for atheists or secular students, leaving church communities are really important, specifically because of the community building component. And if you look at research from people who have left religion, the thing that most atheists say is they miss the most is that sense of community. And I think it's really important to give people spaces where they can have communities where they can be their authentic selves. Because, again, looking at a lot of the research on the experience of atheists, most feel pressure to hide their identities because of stereotypes.
Well, I just find that...
Hang on a second. I don't know if it's just me, but Kristina froze for me. But she's back, so I want to make sure that last part of the question got to Max.
Do you know when I got cut off?
It was just like the last 4 or 5 words.
Okay, I think just saying that creating spaces where people can feel like they are in a community, and I think that it's great to be able to talk across difference, and I don't think people should stay siloed in their own little clubs, but those organizations still serve a purpose of giving people who relate to them for their individual unique experiences, which are going to be different than whatever the dominant culture is. And that's important to give people those spaces.
I see your point, but I think that, being secular is just kind of like not really an identity. Like the entire country is secular, do you really need a space to... And I'm not saying like it should be like illegal or something, but I think it's unnecessary for an atheist to come and meet with a bunch of other atheists and just sit in a room and say, well, how great it is that we don't believe in a God. And also,
hey, Max,
it's also stupid.
Max, I've spoken for SSA groups. I don't know. I don't even know how many times. Do you think I've ever walked in, sat down and said, hey, isn't it great we don't believe in a God? And that was the bulk of the interaction. Do you think that's remotely realistic?
No.
Then why did you say it?
Because you don't go to every single meeting, right? It's like a Republicans club doesn't have Ben Shapiro over every single time.
I'm sorry, Max. You are approaching the dishonest level in which I will hang up on your ass. Or do you think that other SSA events are just about sitting around going, hey, congrats on not believing in God?
But not all of them have speakers.
No. Would you answer the question that I asked you? Because you presented that.
Think so.
You presented that. Then you're admitting that you presented a bullshit straw man misrepresentation of what goes on in order to cartoonize it, right?
No. Okay, let me explain it. I'll explain it.
I don't need you to explain it. I don't need you to explain it. You've already acknowledged that what you said is not even what you suspect is going on, right? So why did you say?
No, I suspect partly that's going on. Sometimes they have speakers. Sometimes they do some other.
Sometimes, if something happens, does that mean that it is representative of what's going on most of the time?
No.
And if it's something that's not representative of what's going on most of the time, why would you decide to use that as your summary of why events are unnecessary? If you're not accurately representing what goes on most of the time, or any of the time, as a matter of fact, why would you use that as your caricature of what events are like?
Because I know how it happens in similar societies. Republicans club, Democrats club.
No, you don't. No, I don't give a shit what happens in Republican club or what you know. Let me ask you this. Do you think there's a space for Campus Crusade for Christ?
No.
Cool. At least you're consistent. Now, why, when Kristina's here and talking about what's actually going on, why would you present a caricature of an SSA meeting when you've never been to one, when you don't know anything about them? Why would you present a caricature instead of asking the vice chair of the Secular Student Alliance what sort of things actually go on? Because right now you're telling all of us how you don't think they're necessary, while every phrase out of your mouth shows that you don't understand what it's like to be secular. You don't understand what it's like to be a secular student. You don't know what it's like to participate in a secular student events. And yet, despite being monumentally, catastrophically ignorant about all of it, you've decided that your thoughts are of value here.
Okay, Mrs. Vice Chairman, Doctor, what happens there? Is it not just meetings?
So it depends on the club. Again, when we talk about these organizations, like their meetings, they might be a space that says, hey, let's talk about our experiences. And I think going back to one of the reasons why they're necessary, I'll bring up my own experience. When I was in college, I was questioning religion and I didn't know what I believed. And the only clubs on campus that were available to me were Christian clubs that were going to tell me that Christianity is right. I didn't have an option to go to a club that said, hey, here's another perspective. So having the options to be able to explore different ways of thought is one of them. Two, these clubs don't just sit around and talk. Again, they do different things. A lot of them are involved in interfaith dialogues. Like you were saying, this idea that talking across difference is important. One of the things that the club that I was in did, we met with Christian groups and we talked about stereotypes. One of the most interesting things I had happen was a student who was Christian asked why atheists are angry all the time. And this is a big stereotype. And so some of us talked about some of the things that we're frustrated about, some of those experiences that we've had. I was able to tell this other student the story about when I left my church and my mom, who's still Christian, was told that she's a bad mom because I became an atheist, how that hurt and how that made me frustrated with organized religion. And it helped him understand things better. We were able to tell stories about people who were kicked out of their homes because they were not religious. And it was able to build empathy. You have students who just want to get involved in communities but don't want to do charity work that's with a church. And a lot of charity work is through churches. And so having a space that lets them do that through other secular students, like there's so many options for students, and depending on the club, they'll do different things. And yes, some clubs might come together and say, hey, we're going to talk about why we don't believe in God. We're going to have debates. But still, that's the idea of having that intellectual stimulating conversation brings value to those students. And I think that's really important, that we create space for students to be able to have conversations that they need to have.
Okay. I mean, I don't have anything to add. I'm personally not convinced. I think college should be a place of learning, not a place to discuss feelings. You know,
are you opposed to all extracurricular activities? Like, is it a problem for college students to have a bowling club or an anime club?
I think it's not what the colleges are for. It's for them to learn skills, to be.
Who gets to decide what colleges are for? I mean, they're paying to go to the university. If we're trying to have a university where people are educated and we're giving them a broad education, do you not think that the human aspects of the person are important as well? That character development, of learning how to interact with people you don't agree with, of finding people who share interests and building those connections, you don't think that those connections go and translate into the business world?
I mean, I don't think so. Not necessarily, no. I
think I'm not going to be working with you, Max. I wish you luck, but what you think is going on in reality, what you think is going on in reality is so divorced from anything that I've ever learned about reality. Like, I was in the Navy for 8.5 years. We didn't just sit around in uniform following orders and staying silent the rest of the time. We have hobbies, we have interests, we merge our lives. There are people who are going to be friends for years. The people you meet in college and university are likely to become your spouse, your partner, your business partner, the connections that you use to get jobs, and forging those connections with people with something beyond, oh, I sat next to you in calculus, I sat next to you in a statistics course, forging relationships where, hey, this group of people here are the ones that I had fun with. They're the ones that I had conversations with. I know they have similar interests with me. That's how the world works, Max. I hate to tell you, but you seem to have missed a big chunk while you were at DePaul of value that you could have gotten from that university.
Yeah, you know what's that called in my country? It's called luck. It's called using your connections to get a job that you are not deserving to have based on your skills and other things. It's saying, oh, my friend, can you give me a job or give my son a job?
I'm sorry. I'm not talking about nepotism, and I'm not talking about favoritism. I'm talking about building connections. I don't think that unqualified people should be hired, but if I have 4 qualified candidates and one of them is someone that I have connections with because either we went to university together or we were in a club together or we had friends who were in a club together, there's absolutely nothing wrong with me using those connections to provide a job to that person if they're qualified.
Yeah, that's a typical American answer. And that's how you got Kamala Harris being selected as the VP before Biden even started looking for people.
I'm in favor of Kamala Harris not only being VP, but I'm in favor of Kamala Harris becoming president. Are you suggesting that Kamala Harris is a DEI hire?
I'm suggesting so, because didn't Biden say?
Then I'm going to ask you. Then I'm going to ask you the follow-up question, which is, what's wrong with a DEI hire if the person is qualified?
Because the best person should get the job, and there was no proper process.
You have not done anything at all to demonstrate that Kamala Harris is not qualified for the job or that she wasn't the best person for the job. The best person for the job is a subjective assessment generally, because we don't know everything about the people and we don't know everything about the job. So I'll make it really simple. Is Kamala Harris qualified to be vice president of the United States?
Yes, but didn't Biden say
no, there's no but.
Shut
the fuck up, Max. There's no but after that.
Didn't you say so?
It was a yes or no question. I did say so. It's my show. Guess who gets to say so? You just acknowledged that shut up, Max. I let you talk a lot. I will let you talk again when I'm finished. If you interrupt me one more fucking time, you will not get to speak. Is that understood?
Okay. Go ahead.
You just acknowledged that Kamala Harris is qualified, which means that whether or not that there's nothing wrong with the fact that you think she was a DEI hire, because we hired someone who was qualified for the job. How can it be a problem if someone qualified gets the job?
Because when Biden said his next VP is going to be a person of color, he automatically disqualified the rest of the American population. You know, the 55%
yes.
of whites.
Yes.
So
and by the way,
she was
I need you to prove that there was a better choice among all the people he disqualified. And you can call me back when you get that proof. You can call me back when you get that proof. But go ahead, Kristina.
I think it's also important to point out, like, yes, Biden did say that, but if you also consider who's Trump has looked at for VP, there is no chance that somebody who was not a Christian was not going to be Trump's vice president. Trump didn't have to say that, but it's definitely implied considering who he's trying to cater for a campaign. So if we're mad at someone for saying the silent part out loud, that we're trying to look for people who have particular identities for various reasons, whether it's because we're trying to appeal to a base, or in the case of Biden, we're recognizing that this position has never been held by someone of particular standpoints. So we want to celebrate diversity and pick someone who is very qualified. I think that's an important part there. We oftentimes ignore the fact that we don't talk about the fact that there are always aspects of people's identities that don't get talked about and how they get hired, yet they're framed as being the most qualified, even though if you were not a Christian, you wouldn't have had a chance of being Trump's VP.
Okay, yeah, you're right about that. I'm not going to contest it.
So the other thing is, when somebody like Biden says, hey, as a vice president, I'm going to pick a person of color. Your view of this, which betrays your bigotry, is that that's Biden excluding tons of qualified candidates. But the reality is that what it is Biden narrowing where he's going to focus, because he recognizes that there are qualified candidates in many different categories that we're not presented with the same opportunity that he was. There are people who are potentially much better hosts for this show than I would ever be, but they weren't given the same sorts of advantages in life that I was. And so I could pick another white guy to be a co-host, or I could have women on, or I could have people of color on. I could decide to just say, okay, I'm going to interview 1,000 people from all varieties of life to pick a new co-host. Or I could say, you know what? I already know if I go to all these different categories, I'm still going to end up with, let's say, 63 candidates. So if there are 63 candidates that are all similarly qualified for the job, how can it be a problem for me to pick someone who represents a portion of the community that has been traditionally sidelined and marginalized so that they're less likely to get picked? How can that be wrong?
That wouldn't be wrong. And if Biden just said, I think
cool. So it's not wrong. Thanks for acknowledging it. I'm going to move on now, Max.
Okay. Well, good night to you.
Good night. It's really difficult when someone's like, oh, I don't see why this is necessary. It'd be good if they would recognize that the reason they don't see that it's necessary is because they aren't able to see things from the point of view of somebody else, and that it takes some effort, and that instead of calling into the show, this is one of the reasons why I'm happy to get SSA folks to call in. Instead of calling into this show, what Max should have done is gone back to DePaul and tried to interact with members of the queer community, members of the African-American community, members of the Puerto Rican community, members of the Hispanic community at large, and members of any marginalized community, who feel like there's value in community, and specifically value in a narrow community, the people whose lived experiences are like yours. It is not an isolation thing. When queer folks get together, it's not to say, oh my God, all these straight people around me all the time. It's just absolutely terrible. I can't take it. It is a chance to commiserate about some of the things they're going through, a chance to be supportive of each other. And it's not isolation from the straights, because they're going to have to deal with them 90% of every day of the rest of their fucking lives. Just like when I'm done with this show for the day, I go down the hall, or Arden comes down the hall, because sometimes it takes me longer to get stuff put up here than it does for her. And we give each other a hug, and we go downstairs, and we shit talk all of you. Like, no, it is this call, that call, and it's none of it is mean in the sense that it is, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. Tonight, I guarantee you it's going to be, oh my God, can you believe that Max called in to say, at least he was consistent that he's not in favor of there being a campus crusade for Christ either. But it all leads up to Max's idea that universities are for learning only. University must be for class. You go to class, you study class, you go home, you study what the class was, then you come back and you study more. There is no social life and interaction. It might be one of the reasons that Max continually calls in with some quirky, slightly skewed perceptions about reality on occasion. He's a nice guy, kinda, but he definitely wants to talk about how Kamala shouldn't be president or vice president. He definitely has a problem with women. This has come up over and over again. And we're going to talk about you, Max, but not for long, because Arden's going to have to spend a whole bunch of time cutting clips out of that and doing all that stuff. And we have the finale of Agatha All Along to watch tonight. So I guarantee you we're not going to spend that much time reviewing Max. Hopefully, there's some other callers to talk about too. Alfred's been on hold for a while. Appreciate the wait. Alfred's in Texas. Pronouns are he, him. Has a question. Is there anything positive about Christianity in the Bible? How you doing, Alfred?
Fine. Thanks for taking my call. It's a small honor to talk to you. I've known about you for many years. So,
thanks. It should be an even smaller honor.
Okay. So I called in. I think the guy screwed up the question a little. It was, I'll start. I've been listening to you guys ever since I was a teenager. Sam Harris as well, I'd put in that bin. I have a few of his books. And yes, I learned about Friedrich Nietzsche later in life. And one thing I learned was that he was saying a lot of the things that the quote New Atheism was saying like centuries before. And frankly, it was a little better. But my point is, one thing that was really refreshing about him was he felt he could bring himself to say positive things about the Bible without saying but. He thought that the Old Testament was it's actually kind of the reverse, because like a lot of times you bring up the Old Testament with new atheists, it's like, oh, there's all that barbarism, and then you say, well, what about the New Testament? They're like, oh, well, it's 2.0. He was kind of flipped, and he thought the New Testament was trash, but he Old Testament. And
Alfred, I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little. Like there's a problem with the signal or the audio compression. So you're talking about Nietzsche, and Nietzsche had more problems with the New Testament than the Old Testament. I'm pretty sure I'm on record of saying that I have more objections to the New Testament than the Old Testament. But I also find positive things in both, not in every book, but in both testaments. But I also disagree with Nietzsche on a truckload of things, and I don't particularly find Nietzsche all that impressive myself. But
oh, really?
So
I think he was one of the most intelligent people who ever lived. Do you have other videos about Nietzsche that I could check out?
Nope. And I wasn't talking about intelligence. I'm just talking about I have not generally been impressed by Nietzsche, but it's because I'm also benefiting from everybody who spoke since then as well.
Yeah. So, like, what positive things are you guys able to say about the Bible or Christianity?
Well, I think, like, from my perspective of just how I look at religion as a whole, and I think this is with any ideology, philosophy, whether we're talking about atheism, religion, is that it can be a tool that can be used for a lot of good. It can also be a tool that can be used to justify problematic things. And so I think when people do use, the idea of love thy neighbor and then actually follow through on that idea, I think that's a great aspect of it. When people say love thy neighbor, but not if you do all these things that my Bible says you can't do, that's not a great, from my perspective on a personal level.
Oh, you just blew it. Alfred was desperately wanting you to get to say something nice without a but.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, you know what the word but means. The cancellation of everything that was said before it.
I can tell you, though, Alfred, you're probably not going to get us to say something nice without a but, because the fact of the matter is Christianity and the Bible are not unified and are complex and complicated. And so
yes.
It would be dishonest. Like, I can say, hey, well, at least Jesus talks a little bit about compassion and forgiveness. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Okay, that's.
Oh, you don't want a but, you want an and? Okay. And
yeah, and then
the Bible supports owning people as property, supports Christians viewing themselves as victims, supports eternal punishment for finite crime. I can go on and on with the ands, because the ands aren't good. I gave you the thing. I was going to not offer a but at all. But let's say for a second that we can list 12 good things in the Bible. Let's just say there were 12 instead of 1.
All right.
Does that tell us anything at all about whether or not the Bible's claims about God, about souls, about afterlives, does that tell us whether any of that's true?
Okay, I'll ask you a question. And
no, I'm sorry. I just asked you a question. You don't get to turn around and then say, oh, I'll ask you a question. I just asked you a question.
Okay. No, I don't. I am a devout Christian. Do you think I find
no, I don't. And that doesn't answer my question.
Sorry.
Does finding good things in the Bible tell us anything at all about whether or not there's a God or a soul or an afterlife?
No.
Cool. So why is it relevant that the Bible has something good in it? I'd be hard pressed to find any book that doesn't have something good in it.
It's that this conversation is so difficult to have for you to say the Bible has something good about it and not be able to cancel everything. I'm not
having difficulty with this conversation, Alfred. You are.
I think it's an interesting question, though, of the idea that it cancels it out, in the sense that I think that there's a recognition that there can be good and bad, and that a book is complex, and recognizing that complexity doesn't cancel out, from my perspective. I don't want to see if I'm misunderstanding what you're asking, but
sure.
I'm wondering why that has to be a cancel.
I've heard people say, and this is one of my favorite lines, I don't want a nuclear war with Russia, but, and that, in my mind, that's like an admission. Oh, you are willing to risk a nuclear war with Russia, but is the cancellation of everything you just said. What if your spouse?
No, it's not. That's not the way but works.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's not. It's a conjunction between two independent clauses. The clause that comes after doesn't necessarily. So I can say, I don't want a nuclear war with Russia, but I'm convinced one's probably going to happen whether I want one or not. That isn't a cancellation. The first clause is about what I would prefer, and the second clause is about what I think is likely.
Okay. Okay. That's fair. The way I've usually heard it is I don't want to, well, the way it's usually put is I don't want a war with Russia, but, and then it's like sending ammunition to Ukraine or whatever. And obviously that inflames the situation. And
doesn't mean if we send ammunition to Ukraine, that doesn't mean there's going to be nuclear war with Russia. It just, the fact that it increases, the fact that something may increase the likelihood of it means I hope it doesn't go this far, but I'm still going to take this action because this action is good. And it's then up to Russia to determine whether or not it goes that far.
Okay.
So what's a bad thing in the Bible?
I think, I won't say the Bible. I agree with you that the idea of a place where people are tormented forever, that's something that haunted might be too strong of a word.
Why is it you get to ask me about a good thing in the Bible, and then when I say what's a bad thing in the Bible, you won't answer it?
No, I said, I'm talking about hell.
The Bible isn't very clear on hell. The Bible isn't clear, and that's why Billy Graham was an annihilationist. So when I ask you, what's something bad in the Bible? Yeah, okay. I've done this for a while. What's something bad in the Bible? Why can't you just say something that's bad in the Bible?
All right. I think there's a psalm where it says something like, "Blessed are the people who bash their brains," or something like that. That's bad.
Blessed is he who dashes thy children against the rocks.
Yes, I was waiting.
So do
Yes.
you think the slavery stuff's good?
What do you think?
I was asking you.
What do you think my response is going to be, sir?
Well, ordinarily, for most decent, civilized people, when I ask them what's wrong with the Bible, they don't try to go to a single passage in Psalm that virtually nobody's ever heard of because it's a song and not an instruction. Instead, they go, I'm against the Bible's position on slavery. But you didn't do that, so I thought I'd ask about it.
No, I'm against slavery.
Cool. Why is the Bible why is the Bible in favor of it? Is the Bible from God?
I would say there are a number of reasons. As you know, it was a common practice at the time.
Yeah, but it specifically tells you, the Bible specifically tells you who to enslave. Does that instruction come from God?
Does the instruction come from God? I don't think a perfect creator would dictate that kind of legislation, so no.
How can you tell which parts of the Bible are from God and which aren't?
I don't know if I claimed any. So when you say from God, what do you mean by that? Like dictated?
Well, you literally just suggested that the passages that approve and endorse slavery, in your opinion, aren't from God. And so I'm now asking you, how do you determine whether or not something in the Bible is from God or not?
I can't.
Then how did you just do it a minute ago?
Because I define God as a supreme, perfectly good being. And such
so
a
you
being
can't do it, but you can if you define God as a supreme, perfect being. So basically you're saying, if the Bible says something that you don't agree with, you determine that it's not from God.
No, it's not that I don't agree with it.
Okay, then who's not agreeing with it?
You got me stumped. I don't know. Maybe I'll just defer to, it seems self-evident. Like,
if it seems self-evident, then why does the Bible, which is supposed to be the inspired word of God, why does the Bible get it wrong? And why does the Bible get it wrong in the same book that gives other instructions. So if the Bible's wrong about the slavery instructions, is it also wrong about those other instructions in the same book?
I don't know what you mean by wrong. Do you mean by wrong that it's not from God?
Well, you don't think that the instructions about slavery is from God because you have a view of God that is incompatible with that particular passage. What about when the Bible says, if a theft be certainly found in his hand alive, whether it be an ox or an ass or a sheep, he shall restore double. Does that come from God?
I would say that reflects the beliefs of people, Israelites, their understanding of God.
Okay. So when it says you're supposed to put someone to death if they work on the Sabbath, does that come from God?
Again, I'd say that reflects their belief. People who lived, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, their belief in God. And that belief... Why is it
that there's stuff in the Bible that isn't consistent with and is directly in conflict with what you think God would want? Why is that stuff in the Bible?
Okay. I think you know this, that there are books of the Bible that contradict themselves. Like the Gospel of John contradicts itself, correct?
Sure. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think for one instant that makes me go, man, just F this Christianity before, but now it's right there. It contradicts itself.
Oh, it clearly doesn't make you do that. The issue is, why is that stuff in the Bible? What is your justification for having untrue things and ungodly things in the book?
For me, the Bible is a way of understanding God. The Bible is not God, as many.
How can it be a way of understanding God if it includes things that are incompatible with God? And pretends that they're compatible. Misunderstandings. So, okay, you think Jesus came down to earth and said and did things that are recorded in the New Testament, right?
I don't mean to...
That's a yes or no.
A little.
That's a yes or no.
Do you think Jesus was a historical figure?
Do you think Jesus came down to earth and said things that are recorded in the New Testament?
I think that Jesus was a real man who preached about the God of Israel. He was a Jew, yes.
So Jesus was a real... Oh my God. Do you not think Jesus... No. Do you think Jesus was God?
I think that later Christians, especially people in the
Alfred,
community.
I am completely bored fucking talking to you. I'm going to let Kristina in here because otherwise I'm just going to hang up on you because you are being incredibly dishonest. I asked you what you thought. I didn't say, tell me what you think other people thought. If you don't have a brain in your head, have those other people call my show because I'm done talking to you.
Okay. May I ask a question, please?
Go for it.
Do you think, I know you probably don't think Jesus walked on water or said everything attributed to him. You think he was a historical figure, right?
I think there may be a historical figure there that I don't know anything about specifically.
Maybe?
Correct. That's what may meant. Why is that confusing?
I mean, you don't think he was a Jew or that he taught about God?
I don't know what he was or who he was because the only record is the New Testament. There are no historical documents that demonstrate that there's anybody there. I think it's very plausible that there was an itinerant Jewish rabbi or a collection of different Jewish rabbis that became the character that is presented in the Bible. But I have no way of demonstrating that. And so I'm fine with the concept that he possibly or probably existed, but there's no evidence to confirm that, which is why I said maybe.
Okay. All right. Thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it.
Go away. Well, sorry about that, but the original question was, is there anything positive in Christianity in the Bible? And what's funny is I started the show earlier and I don't know how many people remember this, but I specifically said something along the lines of, when I hear people talk about religion bad, and I pointed out that people on behalf of their religion have created universities and hospitals. And I can't count the number of times I've pointed out there are good things in the Bible and within Christianity and in Judaism and in Islam, and there's probably something good in Scientology. I just haven't read everything to know that there's something good in there. But Alfred wouldn't acknowledge that he thinks Jesus is God. Cool. If you don't think Jesus is God, fine. I agree. Even if he existed, I don't think he was God. It is bizarre to me that we can sit here and try to say, okay, the whole point of this show, Alfred, before you call back, because you probably shouldn't, is for people to call in and tell us what they believe and why. And then we can have a discussion about it. We can point out where we disagree and why. The purpose of this show is not for you to call in and quiz me or to quiz my guest, but we're happy to answer questions. The problem is you need to answer the question that you're actually asked. This isn't my first rodeo. I've done this for 20 years. I know which questions to ask to get the conversation to move in the direction that it needs to go, where potentially one of the two of us, either me or you, are going to learn something or realize something. Thank you, at least, Alfred, for acknowledging when you were stumped. That was fine.
I was gonna say, I do think it's interesting, the idea that but cancels out, and as rather than acknowledges complexity, because I think that's especially with like just thinking about trying to articulate atheist ideas, sometimes it is like just this idea of recognizing complexity is framed as a pure attack on religion, where I think you can recognize that there are good things and problematic things, and people tend to, I think, oftentimes get really frustrated and say, oh, you're only attacking. And it's like, you can also recognize complexity. And I think that's really important to be able to articulate and understand in a conversation too.
Yeah. I apologize in advance and a little bit for having all of the back and forth on that. I'm going to do 2 calls and I'm going to take both of them very, very quickly. And they're politics things. So I'm going to knock these out real quick. Squeak in California, they, them. Squeak's a pagan. How you doing, Squeak? If you're using the web to call, you have to tap to wake your phone up and then tap to wake the browser up so that we can hear you. Okay. Well, in that case, Squeak says, I will not be complicit in the Gaza genocide, no matter how much you try to shame me into voting for Kamala. Congratulations, Squeak. You are complicit in the Gaza genocide, because the only vote that you can make right now that does anything at all to move the needle on Gaza, to slow or stop a genocide, is to vote for Kamala Harris. Any of your third-party votes are absolutely the equivalent of thoughts and prayers. They will accomplish nothing. And a vote for Trump is a vote for someone who wants Bibi Netanyahu to exterminate them and to do anything that he can. And so if you're not voting to specifically give the United States the best chance to stop the fascist, Christian nationalist, bullshit Trump campaign that wants the destruction of those people, congratulations, you are complicit in the genocide. All right. Guy is in Texas and says he's withholding his vote this year because he doesn't know who to vote for. Guy, do you have like a particular issue that's your pet issue?
So I'll preface this by saying I grew up. Can you hear me first of all?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll preface this by saying I grew up in a conservative household, and I've only been an independent adult for about 2 years now. So on the tail end of Biden's term.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like,
in that,
have you got like your top 2 issues?
I would say middle class, like the housing affordability is a really big thing for me, just like pricing out the middle class. And
sure. So Harris has I'm going to read you this from NBC. Harris has taken a prominent role as vice president, advocating for federal programs to expand access to affordable housing and reduce homelessness, being the public face of several announcements by the White House over the past year. She's also spoken out against racial bias in the home appraisal process and promoted a plan to give homeowners more recourse if they feel their home was unfairly appraised. Quote, we've heard the stories of Black family that gets a home appraisal and the valuation is much lower than they know what their home is worth, Harris said during remarks in Detroit as May. As a senator, Harris introduced legislation to provide tax credits to households whose rent and utilities exceed 30% of their income, and a separate bill to invest more than $100 billion in affordable housing. In addition, her tax plan is the only one of the two where middle class and lower class income or lower income families will get a tax break. Everybody under Trump's plan, they will all pay more in taxes, and only the billionaire class will pay significantly less, whereas under Harris's plan, the billionaires will end up paying more. According to Trump wants to lower housing costs by encouraging new construction on the periphery of cities and suburban areas where land is the cheapest, and he cancels out Biden's anti-suburban housing regulations. The Trump administration would also unleash American energy and rein in Biden's out-of-control spending to lower inflation and mortgage rates. Trump initially sought to reduce barriers to building high-density housing, but in 2020, he spoke out against building affordable housing in suburban areas, saying he would prevent a dystopian vision of building low-income house units next to your suburban house. Of those, which housing plan do you favor?
Definitely the first one.
Cool. Is there another issue that's like really high on the list for you?
No, that's what I was saying initially, because I grew up very conservative. In the last year or so, I've renounced religion and really started reevaluating my world view, like how I see the world. And so I was kind of jaded by Trump because one of the big things that I had for him was like, oh, well, the tax cut, it lowered marginal tax rates, which was huge. But then I realized that it effectively was a net wash because he took away a lot of deductions that a lot of families used. And so it's been really difficult the past 6 months to say, like, okay, I hear Kamala and what she's saying, but this thing that I supported Trump for ended up being a lie. And so now I'm kind of hesitant to jump on the Kamala train because I'm scared of being jaded again.
I hear you, and I appreciate this guy. I'm an idiot when it comes to economics and economic policy, which is why I read that stuff, and I've gone out to read a bunch more stuff. I can say that from my point of view, I have a difficult outside of abortion. Like if abortion was your main issue, then Trump is the one that's opposed to abortion, but Kamala's going to actually do what she can to protect that. Kamala's better on, more consistent with my views on every single issue. But at the end of the day, even if I knew nothing about Kamala's policies, Trump was president and attempted to stage an insurrection and get his vice president killed in order to overthrow the will of the people. Then this appointed a number of Supreme Court justices that then went on to basically grant the president immunity for actions that are official actions. And Trump has stated that he wants to be a dictator starting day one or just on day one, that he wants to use the military to jail dissidents and to take away to shut down the newspapers and things that agree with him. Everything that Trump is doing is pro-fascism and consistent with Christian nationalism a la Project 2025, even if he says he doesn't know or like everything in Project 2025. This to me...
So I do have a question about that. Like, we know, or at least the way that the government is set up is that a person can't just become president and then eradicate the government and pass all these bills about in favor of them becoming a dictator and shut down private networks that disagree with it.
Why not?
Well, if they're passing bills for it, is there not a due process with the
there's
Congress
a bunch of things
that
there's a bunch of things that can be done as just executive actions. So right now, for example, trans people were allowed to serve in the military, and then when Trump got in, he revoked that, and then Biden reinstated it. If we elect Trump again, he's going to revoke it again. He's also going to declare that there are only two genders and only the one that's on your birth certificate is the one that matters. Now, while you and other people, I don't know you, Guy, I'm not saying you don't, but while you or other people might not care that much about trans people or agree with them, at least we should be able to recognize that maybe the rights of trans folks shouldn't be like a fucking yo-yo that's decided on the whim of whoever's in the office. And so I'm going to vote for stability, for equality, for democracy, for the best position on climate change, the best position I'm aware of on the economy, the best position on human civil rights that is available. I disagree with Kamala Harris and Biden on a number of things. They're not perfect at all. But I fail to see, this is why I appreciate your call, Guy, because I am baffled at people who are so uninvolved in politics that despite the fact that we've been dealing with this stupid, traitorous buffoon since 2016, don't know who they're going to vote for. A call like yours, I genuinely thought it was going to go poorly, and I'm baffled as to how anybody could be here a few days before the election and not know how they're going to vote. When for me, not only is this the most important, it's the most obvious contrast of policy and personality we've ever seen.
I can completely understand that, and the reason that it didn't go as poorly as you thought. I've been watching your stuff for a year, and you guys have really helped me. You, Forrest, Jimmy, Eve, all of you guys have really helped in my deconstruction, and so I understand the direction of the call and what type of questions and answers you guys are looking for. I understand the sentiment of like, how can somebody not know who they're going to vote for? It's just literally like my mother, the way that I was raised, she was a QAnon believer, and so that was a part of what was going into my head pre-COVID, and then COVID hit, and it's this big conspiracy. And so I grew up in a very pro-Trump household, and like I said, I understand everything. And I even support Kamala on a lot of things. Like I'm not even really big into trans, pro-trans movements, but I'm like, yeah, you guys have rights. That's not like on the front lines with them, but gay people have rights, trans people have rights, lesbian, all of you guys have rights just like I do. But it's just,
except they won't.
I guess I'm just like I'm scared. Who else was going to ask? So the executive orders, those are things that the presidents can do and make like effective change immediately, correct?
Yeah.
Is that what you were referencing? Okay.
Yeah.
So I should look into that and see like what are the risks.
Definitely.
Go look at what office.
Go look at the different executive orders that presidents have done. Some of them can get overturned, and some of them can get shot down, and some of them can be. Oh, I'm hearing myself echoed back, but some of them can be challenged in court, and then there's things that that the Congress can do. But if you do a Google search for Harris versus Trump policies, you'll find a number of websites that go through a bunch of them. Read a few of them so you're not getting them from one source, but look up executive orders and what they can do, because presidents can do quite a lot, but Trump's in a specific position where he feels that he can do anything. And what's happening is the Supreme Court is close to backing him up in that he cannot be legally prosecuted for anything that he does that is an actual official act. So if he can convince people and the military to round up dissidents, the enemy within, and if he can take millions of aliens and round them up and prepare to deport them, what do you think that's going to do to the economy? If he's right and there's 21 million aliens that he wants to deport, what do you think the loss of 21 million people will do to the economy in addition to his tariffs?
Oh, it would definitely hurt the economy, because even though they don't have socials, they have tax identifying numbers, and they still pay taxes into the system.
And they are working and producing and benefiting the United States. If you want to start paying $5 per orange, vote for Trump.
So I'll definitely look into that. I honestly, man, I really appreciate the call. I can't promise I'll vote. I just, for some reason, it's really difficult for me to pull the trigger.
Yep, I hear you.
I really appreciate this call. And
I was that way once upon a time.
More callers.
You bet. I'll say this real quick before I let you go. I was that way once upon a time. It was largely apolitical, didn't pay attention, didn't vote. And what changed me was recognizing that was privilege. That is me. When I don't vote, that is me saying, you know what, no matter who wins, I'm going to be okay. And instead of sitting there going, am I going to be okay no matter who wins? I needed to look around and say, are the people I love going to be okay no matter who wins? Are women going to be okay no matter who wins? Are people of color going to be okay? Are queer people going to be okay? Are we all going to end up paying more? And by the way, how okay am I actually going to be? I got buckets of privilege, and I decided that I would rather use them to benefit people who aren't benefiting from that privilege. And that includes voting for the better world. So take all your privilege, guy. Take all your privilege. Take all your privilege, wad it up in a ball, swallow it down, and do the right thing for somebody else if you can't figure out how to do the right thing for you.
Okay, well, I definitely I haven't thought about it that way, but the exact wording that you use is pretty much how I've been thinking about it. Is that no matter who's in office, I'll be okay. I haven't really put it into perspective of, what about my neighbor?
Yeah. What about me? What about Arden? What about the people you don't know?
I do care about you guys. I actually didn't know Arden was. Like I didn't even know you guys were together for the longest. But yeah.
Hey, now I don't feel bad that you don't know shit about politics because you don't know shit about any of us.
Yeah. Well, I try not to get too caught up in public figures.
It's okay. I'd rather talk to you than some of the parasocial folks I end up having conversations with. I'm gonna let you go, Guy. Go off and do some research and think about it. And thanks for calling.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Yep. All right. That gets my politics calls out of the way. I have a really spicy call that's been waiting, which I'm going to try my best to sit back on because I have incredible confidence in Kristina's ability to address this. Here we go. Imperious is a caller. You're calling in on the web things. You're going to have to make sure that your phone's awake, although I can hear you. Pronouns are he, him from somewhere in the USA. Imperious is a theist who says atheists are marginalized and I revel in it. Welcome to the show, Imperious.
Yes, sir. Yes, that's very true, sir. Oh my Lord, I feel like I have 44 chromosomes after sitting on the line for that long, but yeah, I revel in it. Because I don't think there's a reason that you can give me into your own paradigm why it's wrong if the preference of one side imposes force on the other.
So just to clarify, so the one side being Christians impose on atheists, or
any side.
Well,
I don't think you can oppose. Oh, sorry, my bad. Go ahead. I'm on that Bluetooth, so if I cut you off, I don't mean to. I apologize.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think at the core idea of our Constitution guarantees freedom of religion. And so if you have a country where one religion is imposing its belief and forcing all people to live under that belief, it's undermining the core value that we're supposed to be promoting in our democracy.
Well, that's arguable that you're coming from the premise that, it gives us freedom of religion and stuff. That the paradigm that the Constitution was written under, as John Adams beautifully stated, is for a moral and religious people and no other. So Oh, go ahead.
And I think that's important. They also believe that it was only for white landowning men, but we realize that was a cultural belief.
And I don't think you could give me an explanation in atheism to why that would be wrong, because I don't think you know what or have a paradigm to understand wrong other than your preference.
I need to jump back in for 1 second. I need you to explain the 44 chromosome remark.
Well, there was a lot of stupidity. So I got a little
What's that have to
stupider
do with
later on in life.
chromosomes? What's that have to do with chromosomes?
That means I was so stupid. Matt, understand humor. Humor is a sign of intelligence. If
Yeah,
I had,
I'm
if I
aware
had
of what.
46
Hang on.
how many chromosomes? How many chromosomes do humans have?
Hang on. Do you understand what hang on is? Hang on is a sign of intelligence as well. I understand humor. I'm asking you to specifically explain your remark because I already know what you mean, and I'd like to expose you as the ignorant bigot that you are.
But again, you can't tell me
I'm a
anything.
light year smarter than you, dumbass.
Wrong? Matt, ball liquor. Why is bigotry wrong?
Case closed. So when Imperius shows back up in chat, if one of the mods could just go ahead and ban him there, because I don't need anybody who's going to make fun of people or chromosomal defects by suggesting that he got stupider on chat and then think that he's actually funny. And then think that ball liquor is an insult of any sense. That is a sign of intelligent conversation to come back with ball liquor. I'm an order of magnitude smarter than you, probably, Imperius. But even if I'm not, I'm an order of magnitude or 10 more moral and superior to you. And that's why you're not allowed to call my show anymore.
I do think...
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, I think like that was going to be I think arguing with somebody that is bigotry wrong, like it's just going to be difficult to persuade someone if they don't think that. But I think one of the things that was interesting that he brought up was this idea that John Adams said that our democracy is made for a religious people. And I think that's important when we talk about one of the reasons why Secular Christian Alliance is so important is we talk a lot about Christian nationalism these days and the rise of Christian nationalism. But one of the reasons why I study Christian nationalism is I look at Christian nationalism at the start of the United States, like when the United States founded. And this was a really common belief that democracy can only exist if you believe in God. And in a lot of states, they banned non-Christians and atheists from voting or running for office. They had blasphemy laws because they didn't want atheists disrupting public peace, which they viewed as being protecting Christianity. And so this idea that that a democracy has to be a Christian nation where Christians are the best citizens and best leaders is deeply ingrained in U.S. culture, just as ingrained as white supremacy, patriarchy. And there's been a very long fight in the secular movement, as well as just the religious pluralistic movement at large with other religious minorities to fight against that idea. And this idea that our Constitution guarantees freedom of religion. And that includes not just the freedom to go to whatever church or no church, but also to say one religion doesn't get privileges over others. And I think that's oftentimes one of those major tensions. And yes, recognizing that some of the founding fathers believed that only religious or Christian people should be citizens. That is true. They also believed in slavery. And there are lots of founding fathers who believed that. We look at Jefferson or Madison, who actually wrote the Constitution, was a big advocate of the idea of keeping church and government separate and protecting the rights of religious minorities, including the non-religious. The founding fathers were hundreds of people who did not all agree on the same thing. And what we want to look at is how we've progressed and how we continue to progress. And when people say we should go back to being a Christian nation, realizing that's going back to a time where religious minorities did not have a lot of rights that we fought for, and we want to keep those rights and keep fighting for equality.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, don't get me wrong, Imperius is obviously like a Darth Dawkins acolyte, I don't believe that atheism has a grounding for any sort of moral blah, blah, blah. So therefore, you can't say anything's wrong. Well, I don't believe that you have a grounding either. Congratulations. So we're both sitting here without a grounding, talking about what we find moral or immoral or anything else. But the problem is that he called in to say, oh, yes, atheists are being marginalized and I revel in it, which is cool. I would have potentially expected something slightly different depending on what kind of theist or Christian he actually was. But the fact that he called in to let us know that he revels in it while mocking people with fewer chromosomes and anybody who evidently licks balls. I would imagine that Imperius might like to have his balls licked someday, so maybe it's not always a pejorative. But, if he doesn't, that's entirely his prerogative, and it's got nothing to do with the show. Just like the statements from our founding fathers on what they preferred vary depending on which founding father you're going to listen to and at what time. And you can go read Thomas Jefferson's letter to Danbury Baptist about church-state separation. You can read virtually anything Madison said on the subject. But I prefer to base my view of how things should work on the Constitution rather than their secondary offline stuff. Because some of the messages that they're saying in letters is stuff that they were able to get into the Constitution in some sense or another. And other things that they were saying were things that they weren't able to get into the Constitution. And so when you go through the Federalist Papers and you go through and you look at what the founding fathers did, every single time a pro-religion amendment or proposed article was presented, that Constitutional Congress voted it down. They had plenty of opportunities to make the United States something more, something different than a secular state. They had more than enough opportunities to say, we are going to include deference to God in the Constitution. And every single time someone tried to get that added, it was voted down. The Treaty of Tripoli, which, while it's not the Constitution, was unanimously ratified by Congress, specifically states that the United States is in no way founded on the Christian religion. And it doesn't even matter because our founding fathers, I hate to tell you, were wrong about a number of things like slavery and the 3/5 compromise and all of the things that they set up based on their view of how things were. But the grand thing that they did was they made the Constitution a living document and provided opportunity for future generations to say, you know what? Daddy was wrong. Granddad was wrong. Great-granddad was wrong. We need to do it this way. They made it difficult so that it wasn't just a matter of the whim of who was elected to office, the way evidently trans rights with regard to the military are. But they gave us the tools so that we could work to change it. The difference here in this particular election is that one of the two candidates that has a strong chance of becoming elected is a fascist who doesn't understand or give a shit about the Constitution, has said that he wants to suspend the Constitution, at least for a little while. And you talk about atheists being marginalized and reveling in it. It's absolutely the same sort of vile, intentional marginalizing that you see from Big Papa Fascist and a number of others that are advocating for a specific brand of Christian nationalism. Now, here's an interesting thing to bring it back to this. And Kristina can and should correct me if I'm wrong. I'm an asshole. You don't need to correct me on that. We all know it's true. In the sense that I am forthright and blunt and honest, and I use colorful language that offends and bothers some people. And if you put all of that together, no matter how right I am, no matter how calm I am or how yelling I am, I can be viewed as an asshole. I know this, not a surprise. I also feel like I'm doing the just thing here. And here's the difference between me and the SSA. I have an interest in convincing people that they are wrong to continue believing and supporting their religion. The SSA isn't out to convert students. They are there to provide students opportunities to be themselves and become activists. And an SSA person can become an activist that is more like Dr. Lee. They can become an activist that's more like me. They can become any kind of activist. To revel in these people being further marginalized is antithetical to the principles of secular humanism. Now, literally 45 minutes before we went live, I finished recording and posting a quick video for my own YouTube channel as part of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You know, patreon.com/atheist debates. Chip in. The rules are getting ready to change. If you're an Apple patron of mine, Apple's getting ready to change its rules. So I hope you pay attention and go over and listen and resubscribe along to my Patreon. But the entire video was nothing but a positive assessment of what I feel secular humanism does for all of us and could do for all of us that religions fail to do. And it's about standing up in opposition to those things. The SSA doesn't even truly explicitly endorse secular humanism. It doesn't even truly explicitly endorse anything other than encouraging students to get involved, be involved, and to push secular values, not even necessarily humanistic values, although I suspect a good many of them are fine with that. This is what happens when religious privilege, the kind that he wants to keep pushing, runs rampant. You get a nation that shifts focus from cooperation to Christian nationalism. From, hey, you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, it's all good. Let's not talk about religion when we're talking about politics, to a nation where there's Project 2025, where there's the Heritage Foundation, where there's Christian nationalism, where there is a concerted effort to push an ideology that revels in the marginalization and destruction of anyone that doesn't agree with them. I don't revel in the marginalization of Christians. I am fine with an end to Christianity, but not the people. I want people to give Christianity and other religions up for good reasons and because they recognize that they had bad reasons previously. That's it. We got 2 calls to get to really quickly, and then we're going to read all the super chats that are over $10. But we have Ditzo in Puerto Rico is an atheist talking about the marginalization of atheists in Latin America. Welcome to the show, Ditzo.
Hi,
I hope I'm
Matt,
pronouncing that right.
It's correct, but it's not Puerto Rico, it's Costa Rica. I'm on the Central American area.
My apologies. It says PR and it should say CR. So thank you for the correction.
Yeah.
Costa Rica.
That's okay. I just wanted to call in since we're almost in this so-called Halloween, to tell us horror stories of what it is to be an atheist in Latin America in many ways. Just to give a quick context, Costa Rica is the only one of the last 3 countries that constitutionally is a confessional republic, meaning that Costa Rica says on its Article 75 of the Constitution that the official religion of the state is the Apostolic Roman. In the last 14 years, my government has paid out of our taxes $7.2 billion to the Catholic Church. On a country that is GDP is about $86-90 billion. So you can imagine what horror stories I can tell what it is to be an atheist on a country who officially is Catholic. And ask away. Ask me anything you want. Yes, my life has been threatened, I've been shot at, etc.
So, well, go ahead, Kristina. I've talked a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you point out something really important is that we talk about the experience of atheists, like we also try to talk about it strictly in the United States, but it's for so many people in places where there is official state religion, it is particularly dangerous to be openly atheist. In the United States, typically being openly atheist isn't deadly, even though there are other potential consequences in terms of marginalization. So I'm curious, like, do you tend to hide your atheist identity, or?
I'm one of the few that have officially and openly, publicly stated I'm an atheist, and I'm fighting to change the Article 75 from Costa Rica. We want to modify that article to show that the state has no religion, no official religion. And that, in that sense, it revels. And yes, somebody else is Raven. I also go by Raven sometimes when I call here. So yeah, basically, it creates this condition where I'm persecuted, where I'm pointed as an immoral agent of Satan. I've been called that way too many times. Where our meetings or our reunions to converse our things are systematically boycotted by the Christians or the Catholics and the Jews and the Islamics, where we are constantly death threatened. And in fact, in my case, not only because I'm an atheist, but because of my political positions, there has been 2 attempts at my life in the past 15 years.
First of all, I want to say thank you for being willing to be open and challenging the kind of religious nationalism, state religion that can be very oppressive to religious minorities as a whole, not just atheists. And we look at a lot of different countries that have had to fight back against religious nationalism, and this is unfortunately oftentimes a key part of that is people who are being open about their identities and challenging these norms are not only risking marginalization, but are oftentimes risking their livelihoods. And so thank you for the fight that you're doing.
Well, somebody got to keep up the fight, especially here in Latin America. Yeah. And if I may just say something real quickly, the so-called national Christians, they are so messed up because in the Western Hemisphere, there are 35 constitutional republics. And in all of them, I have seen, because I've lived through all the countries here, I have seen that same idea. That Uruguay is I'll give you an example, that Colombia is a Catholic Christian country. That all the countries here are Christian and Catholic, and they're the ones chosen from God. And a non-spoken criticism is that United States is a country of heresy, and that the Christians in United States are heretical. They're not real Christians. They are false Christians. That the only Christian countries are the Latin American ones, not the United States. I've heard that in very quiet voices, but it's something that I've seen it. So the North American U.S. citizens that are saying, well, we're a Christian nation, is bullshitting themselves, because you have 30 other nations telling you in the Western Hemisphere, no, you ain't. So they either got to get in sit down and in accordance, which of the 33 nations here in the Western Hemisphere is a Christian nation, and which one is the chosen one. I don't know if that makes sense, what I'm trying to criticize there.
Yeah, I don't know either. I've got to move on, though. I appreciate the call.
My pleasure, Matt, and hopefully another day we can have a long conversation about politics, economics, everything.
I hope not. No offense, but I hope I never have another long conversation about politics for the rest of my life. But it's probably unavoidable. We've got our final caller for today coming up, and then super chats. But I'm mildly confused about this. But Shannon, Burns, are here calling from Utah. God is not necessary to justify the existence of the universe. Congratulations, I agree. Why did we need to talk about it?
Well, because there's an argument for it that I have.
Wait, you're calling...
It's one you've heard before.
Oh, okay. Okay, what is it?
I'm sorry, what?
You're calling to present an argument for why God is not necessary to justify the existence of the universe.
Yes. Or
No,
you
not
could also
or.
call it an. Okay, fair enough.
Just do it. What's the argument?
All right. So it starts with either nothing exists or everything exists. Would you agree with that?
Well, no, I don't.
Oh, really? Because
The
I feel like if
correct,
anything
the correct,
exists
the,
at
the
any.
correct,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
the
ahead.
correct, the correct dichotomy is either nothing exists or something exists. For example, there doesn't exist $1,000 bill in my front pocket right now, so everything doesn't exist. Not even everything that could exist exists. So either nothing exists or something exists is the correct dichotomy.
Okay. Well, I'll take that. I'm fine with either one.
It's your
I thought
argument.
everything and nothing was more exhaustive, but
No, no
I mean,
thing
the reason
or
they called you was
something.
to refine it. Okay,
Okay, next.
understood. Nothing cannot exist, therefore something must exist.
So it seems, okay. Therefore, something must exist. So what do you mean by exist?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure
Let's see.
you're committing an equivocation fallacy, because what you mean by exist in the first premise isn't what you mean by exist in the second premise. Because in the first premise, you're saying either it is the case that no thing exists or it is the case that something exists. And then in the second one, you're saying it is not the case that no thing exists. But what you're really saying is it is not possible or nothing to exist.
Mhm.
And that's
Okay.
different.
So would I just start with nothing can exist? Or excuse me, that nothing cannot exist?
I don't know whether or not it's possible for there to be a state of affairs where no thing exists.
Well, I thought it was the case that, like, for example, to exist means that there is something, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
But nothing isn't something that you can act on. It's not the recipient of, it seems to be the case that what we definitely experience something existing. What you're basically saying is it's not possible for any other state of affair. If it's not possible that there isn't something that exists.
Sure.
How do you know that?
I guess this would be like based on the definition of what it means to exist. Like if there's a thing that isn't anything, then it's not existing.
No, you just created a paradox. A thing that isn't anything. That's a paradox. You are giving properties to nothing.
Excuse me. I should have actually said that paradox is the problem I have with the idea of nothing existing, if that makes sense. Like nothing and existing together is an oxymoron.
Yes, but that's not the same as there is no thing that exists. So like, let's say we found a way to remove everything that exists, to just delete everything that exists, right? So now the state of affairs, if that were the case, is that there are no things that exist, right?
I guess it depends on if you're removing the space that the stuff exists in.
Okay, I just deleted the space.
You remove everything.
I just deleted the space.
So
What's left?
Think that is nothing.
Cool. Now, does that mean there is a nothing that exists, or does it mean that there are no things that exist? Because those two statements are not identical, and that's the problem.
Okay.
But here's the other thing. Let's ignore all that and look at your argument.
Okay.
Either nothing exists or something exists. Nothing cannot exist, therefore something must exist, right?
Yes, that's what it was going to be.
That's your argument. You can't say that this is an argument against God if God doesn't exist in the premises or the conclusion.
Okay, so what I meant was I have this argument that can sort of justify existence without involving God.
Why would any such argument be necessary? The burden of proof is on those who are claiming that a God is necessary.
I completely agree with you on that. I just
then you didn't need to make this argument.
Well, I agree with that too. But
then why did you?
I just found it and thought it was interesting.
Oh, so you found it. Okay. No such argument needs to exist.
I slowly came up with it over the course of the last 2 days, and I wanted to refine it and see if it went anywhere.
Cool. It doesn't go anywhere.
Well, that's why I called you. I'm a huge fan. I'm sorry if I wasted your time. And I know today, I know I wasn't talking about the topic.
No, it's fine. Somebody out there has been thinking the same thing, like 1,000 of us have at different times. And somebody out there heard something in something you said or something I said that brings clarity to this. So we can just let it go and move on.
All right. Well, thank you for talking to me. And I was raised on you, dude. So it's like I'm so nervous talking to you right now.
Well, go take a walk. Go take a walk and call me an asshole and listen to somebody else, and you won't be nervous next time.
You're not an asshole. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes, I fucking am. You want me to prove it? Ask me a question. I dropped him just to prove it. I wanted to get him in mid-sentence for it. Kristina, we have a tradition on the show, and I didn't mention this beforehand. I don't know if you have a hard stop, but we tend to read all the super chats that come in over $10. So if you want to hang out, we can read them together because I think some of them might be questions for you.
I can hang out.
Sweet. In that case, let me remind my producer that if she wants to get me a schedule of a list of the upcoming shows, I will read it all out after the super chats, and I will use that as a cue for the credits. Now I'm just messing with her, and she's absolutely going to glare at me and get in my face later over it, but it's fun. $10 from Rob P. Royalties for my usage of the "We're going to build you a statue" line. Thank you. I've been using that more and more, and there's another one that I've been using that I kind of think I shouldn't, but it struck me as very funny and a good way to express my frustrations. Whenever somebody is talking about something that we've spent time explaining, and they're like, well, that just doesn't make sense. My new answer lately has been, well, it would if you were smarter. But I think I need to stop that, despite how much it amuses me. So I will do my best to scrub that along with others. Here's another one, Kristina.
Wish I had been aware of SSA during the time I was a student. Yeah, I think that's a really, really common sentiment that we get a lot. And that's why we're hoping that people in the future don't have that sentiment, which is why we want a chapter on every single campus.
Thank you so much, Greg. Greg's he's like usually one of the first two super chats for any given show. And I had a nice dinner with him, so that's always good. $10 from Alyssa Silverbow. Light travels faster than sound. That's why some people appear bright until you hear them speak. Oh, hashtag anticipating certain callers. Hashtag I voted. How about you? I voted. I voted on Monday.
I did.
Did you already vote? Yay.
I already voted. I have to get on a plane on 11 today, so I had to vote early.
Yeah. I set aside some memes for other purposes, but I also save a bunch of them. Like, I have when I upgraded my phone, there were so many pictures and screenshots, and a good chunk of them were like memes to save. And I know I'm never going to use 90% of them. And it's not even worth it for me to dig through the thousands I've saved. So today's meme that would have been a good thing to, like, I would put it on the background for Alyosha's post. It's a picture of Susan B. Anthony's grave covered with I voted stickers. Just absolutely, like, you can see her name and that's it. And I was like, that's so good. You know, I don't know if people realize this. Jimmy Snow has a podcast. I don't know how many people realize that, but Jimmy Snow has a podcast. And on the recent episode of the podcast, he and Eve sat down and asked a bunch of people what their gut was telling them about whether or not Trump would win or whether or not Harris would win. And Arden and I submitted our thoughts. There were some actually varied thoughts. There are people who are way more optimistic. There are some people who are mildly pessimistic. I didn't hear anybody who was incredibly pessimistic. We are all, those of us who suspect that Trump is going to win genuinely have never hoped we were more wrong than we hope to be right now. And I fully recognize that my reason for having that suspicion right now is in part because of the people that I deal with in the calls on the show, specifically lately, asking for third-party voters, non-voters, Trump voters to call in and have the discussion. That has skewed my perception. That plus what I think is an unreliable polling scenario right now where nobody should be confident in any poll ever. Nobody should be sitting back saying, you know, we've got this licked, especially when the polls I've seen have been doing this thing around zero constantly. And while I loved listening to what people had to say, I find that I'm more encouraged in some ways by what the algorithm is feeding me from like-minded people. But I know that the algorithm's doing it, which means as soon as I recognize that, it's like having a wonderful dream and then going, oh, wait, this is a dream. And then you wake up. And that's the state that I find myself in all the time. I hope I'm wrong. But the point I was going to make is, if in fact Kamala Harris wins, we will have elected not just the first woman president of the United States, but 50 years ago this week is the first time she was allowed to have a bank account on her own. Within 50 years of beginning to make changes to allow women to be independent and autonomous and not have to have a man to co-sign rent or a home loan, 50 years from that to a woman president. I'm going to cry like a little baby on election day if she wins, and I'm going to cry and scream like a baby with a dirty diaper if she doesn't. But hey, that one's easy. $10 for Corey Springer. Thank you, Corey.
Oh, hey, go the dome. Yeah, I think I'm always down to talk, so please come hang out.
Oh, you got to read it out.
Sorry.
I know most people can see it, but just in case somebody can't see it, we always just read who it is and what they're saying.
Good point. Thank you. So, Dr. Lee, I live in Vermilion and work at the Dome. I love to chat with you sometimes. As you know, there's not a lot of atheists to talk to around here, and would love to find some secular friends. I will happily be your friend and chat with you. And I actually, one of the cool things about, I mean, because of what I research, it comes up a lot that I'm an atheist. And the cool thing is when you start telling people you're an atheist, there's a lot of people who are like, wait, you too? And I think, again, that's one of the reasons why Secular Student Alliance is important, is because people oftentimes feel alone. And it's not until they find someone else that they're like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And then you can build those communities. We have an chat years ago, but it's definitely something I'd really like to find, because you need students to get it going. Love to have them help get started, but would also love to talk to you, Taylor.
I think my big goal for after the election is to, well, I'm going to be seeing a therapist about a couple different things, but one of the things is to encourage myself to stop looking for the bad and expecting the bad. So like the conversation with Guy tonight, that could have been awful. I know what I was expecting based on the subject. It was different from that. And I'm seeing more of that, which is good. But one of the things that people don't realize is that, yeah, I live my life in public. I'm here under my real name, unlike some of the other people who I work with, and no shade to them for not going by legal names, that they don't have people showing up at their doorstep. But the reality is that because it's a show, there are elements of it that draw people who aren't serious, in the sense of they're not taking the subject serious. They want to have some fun or do a Baba Booey in a new, style. I guess that's a really old reference now. That was like a prank caller for Howard Stern, who's awful. But in addition to that, there are people who genuinely just want to sow chaos and discord, and shows like this inevitably get more of them. And so on those occasions, when you see me being incredibly short with someone, it may be somebody that I've had 12 conversations with. It may be somebody who suffers from co-host syndrome, where they're going to call in and give their thoughts in a lecture on that when they weren't invited. I already talk more than than I should with an actual co-host here. I don't need callers who are going to be co-hosts as well. If that's what you're interested in, reach out somewhere else to apply to be a co-host. But I don't even think I finished my thought there. $100. Wow, thank you so much from Red Shrek. I graduated from Howard University, a HBCU, in 2005. On campus, I'm pretty sure there was no SSA presence there, or on the campus of Hampton University. Does SSA have any particular outreach organizations on HCBU campuses?
That is a great question. And this has actually been a really big challenge, because we do have several students who are on, and in case anyone's not as historically Black colleges, and we have a lot of individual students, and we've been working with some to try to get a chapter started, but quite a few students kind of expressed this concern about not being able to, just assuming it's not going to land well on campuses. And you also have a lot of students who express concern that there's concern that by openly rejecting Christianity, there are some people who will view that as a rejectness of the Black community as a whole, because Christianity is really important for that community in the civil rights movement. And so I think it's an important acknowledgement that Black atheists face particular challenges that white atheists don't face, which is one of the reasons why it's so important to have a discussion about intersectionality, of recognizing that not all atheists have the same experience, and it's important to have resources. And we want to continue trying to work with HBCU campuses so that we can build those spaces, so that students feel like there's people that they can relate to, and can relate to those unique experiences that someone like me, as a white atheist with my white privilege, I can learn about. There's a couple of great resources. There's a great book called The Emancipation of a Black Atheist that I highly recommend. But we need to have people who can take on that too, so that we can have people build those networks, so that we can better understand the diversity within the atheist movement as a whole. And so it's something we're working on, but there's a lot of challenges to it.
Is there I feel like I saw something like this on the website, where you can go and search for which campuses have groups. But is there also how to start one there, or other people? We don't have an SSA presence on your campus, but these people have reported that they're interested in to see. I don't know if that exists or not.
Yeah, so we have, so our staff is pretty small for a national organization. It's only got 4 people on it, but we do have 2 kind of campus organizers who help students start chapters. So if students want to start, they can reach out to us. We can help them with the process of, what are the things you got to do with administration. On a rare occasion, administration pushes back, but usually they're pretty easy to work with. And helping them kind of figure out, okay, how do you recruit? Here's we've got lots of cool stickers and materials you can share to start spreading awareness. And then also, do we have anybody else from this campus who's also reached out to us? Do we know of anybody? Right. And as we start getting, the chapters back up again and getting those networks, that'll help a lot as well. But I think one thing that was actually quite useful from COVID is we were able to kind of focus more on creating kind of an individual network too, when is kind of that solo student who can attend things like a webinar. If they might not be able to host something on their campus, but they can participate in SSA in other ways, which has been really nice. We also do a lot of scholarships that you don't have to have a chapter to apply to, but it's a good way to get those chapters started. Is once you get the scholarship, it's a great way to promote and getting more people to join, because we do want to financially support our students too.
Sweet. Thanks. And thanks so much again, Red Shrek. Appreciate it. I think this one's yours to read.
All right. From Horacio Lerda, I'm giving this money because I believe in the power of the mind to fight against indoctrination and bigotry, or the beer I just had made me a giving person. Long live alcohol.
There you go. If having a beer gets you to donate some money.
I appreciate it. And I would also like to point out, if we look at there used to be a ban on alcohol that was pushed by a lot of religious organizations and fought back against it. So drink that beer and remember that we fought against religion being forced on people through prohibition. So.
Yep. Another $10 from Shauna Silverbow. 2-sentence horror story. After working a hard day, I came home to see my girlfriend cradling our child. I don't know which was more frightening, seeing my dead girlfriend and stillborn child, or knowing that someone broke into my apartment to place them there. Ooh. Hashtag Spooktober.
I love a good 2-sentence horror story.
That's a super creepy. Now I'm scared. Thank you. Hey, I got so scared I forgot to say thank you. Oh, $14 from Tariq Al-Safi. Are prophecies like from Isaiah inherently circular, since we have to presume the conclusion that there is a God, or is it not circular reasoning if the Bible made prophecy before it was fulfilled? Let me do the short version of this. By all means, we can call in and have a talk about prophecy. I probably need to do there's probably a video on my channel already about prophecy, but it's probably time to do kind of a slight update one. No, the mere existence of prophecy doesn't mean that it's circular, and it doesn't mean that we have to assume that there is a God. Someone could make a prediction, and it could come true, and you wouldn't know how they managed to get it right. Did they get lucky? Were people working towards implementing the goal? Did they have a time machine? Did some advanced technology portray this to them? Is there a time traveler that sent their psyche back, or did God tell them? So the mere presence of a prophecy that appears to come true doesn't tell you anything at all about how or why it comes true, which is one of the problems, because people are constantly saying, oh, there was this prophecy and this prophecy and this prophecy. And inevitably what you find is these are vague, as in not specific. A prophecy needs to be specific, answerable by a single set of circumstances that is not subject to interpretation or special knowledge that is otherwise unavailable. The prophecy has to be publicly known of its existence, although not necessarily its content, prior to the events. Those are all key. And let's say that the Bible made 73 prophecies that were specific and all came true. How did it do that? I don't know, but I don't have to answer because it hasn't done that. And neither is anybody else. Neither is any newspaper psychic. Neither is John Edward, the South Park biggest douche in the universe. There's been no demonstration in the history of the world of anyone who can reliably make predictions and have them come true in this sense. I can make all kinds of predictions. There's going to be an election on Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day it is. That's when the election is. somebody's going to get elected president. See, there's a non-specific thing. But yeah, no, it's not necessarily circular. It can be, depending on how things are framed. But thanks for the contribution.
Also, the election is on Tuesday. Don't wait until Wednesday. Vote on Tuesday or before.
Tuesday. Yes, it's a good time for my brain to keep working and not fail to work. But this one too.
All right, from Dante Verona. I'm a licensed loan officer as my profession. You know who the secretary of HUD when Trump was president? Ben Carson. Vote Kamala Harris and put an end to this madness. Fact.
Nobody who thinks the pyramids, never mind. I'm not going through Ben Carson. I haven't even thought of Ben Carson in several years.
I kind of forgot that he was, things that you forget.
He's such an embarrassment. I think they've kind of stopped trotting him out on occasion. But $5 from Life is Literary. I love the show, but why do you guys keep giving Imperius what he wants? Feels like such a waste of time for listeners and other waiting callers. Well, I'm not going to keep giving him what he wants. He's just got banned from my show, at least. I don't know when we've spoken. I don't recognize that pseudonym. And I've done this for 20 years, so even all the voices run together at this point. And so a lot of you who are big fans are like, oh, I recognize that voice. That's so-and-so. I'm kind of oblivious at this point. I used to be really good at recognized voices, but now if you're not somebody that I actually know in person, you don't have to put on a fake voice. You could call in with the same voice, and it's probably going to take me most of the call to even remember that we've spoken before. But
I think it's always, I think it's fair to say don't platform some people, but it's also useful to point out whether he was being sincere or a troll, like those kind of attitudes are existent, and it's something that atheists experience. And sometimes people need reminders that there are some people who have really problematic views like that. So
not only that, hey, my wonderful producer down the hall there. Are you available?
Yes.
Do you think we're likely to get a good clip out of the Imperius call?
Probably not, honestly. It was pretty short, and he said like a couple, he implied some slurs, I guess, right? He was trying to be derogatory, so I probably wouldn't put that in a clip.
Okay. Then, there's no good reason to have him on again. If I'm not going to get any sort of clip that's going to be useful for people, I got plenty of people to talk to frustrate me without it being, some, insult comic hamster, because he's nowhere near what Triumph can do. Sent that last super chat seconds before he was banned, sending another appreciative 5 just for shutting that shit down. Thank you so much. I also like to double check to make sure that I'm right. I thought that I was clear on what he said, but I wanted to double check, because if I misheard or if I got it wrong, I didn't want to just be like, rah, 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 get the phone on my show, and then, be like, no, hang on, Matt, you misunderstood that. This one is from Mr. Boricua. Matt, very much appreciate the painted history lesson story. Imperius, very annoying with smug dishonesty and superiority complex. Dr. Lee, great to have you here. Wish I knew the SSA while I was in uni. This one is yours.
All right, Matt, you are my kind of a-hole. Keep doing what you. I hope you and the line can convince enough people to keep our nation a democracy. TH, does Jimmy Snow have a podcast?
Jimmy Snow does have a podcast, and I will help you out, because hashtag DATH is don't apologize to him, and it's from an episode of Chewed Gum. $50. Holy crap, you guys are being incredibly generous this evening, and I greatly appreciate it. It might have something to do with when I said, give us your money, give us all your money, give all the money right now. Did that shit work? If I say that right now, if I'm sitting here saying, look, I'm not very good at actually asking for money, but the line runs off of your contributions and your donations. You need to make sure you go to linemerch.com. You need to make sure you go to the Patreon. You need to make sure you like and subscribe. And you definitely need to make sure that you're sending in super chats right now, because that's how we pay for those phone calls. That's how we pay to, keep me alive despite my weak and fragile heart. Is there not another $50 donation coming in yet? What's taking so long? I'm kidding, but not. Hi, Matt, and fellow CSU alumni, Dr. Lee. Thank you for everything you do. I'm proud to say that I voted for Harris. I'm ready for a better world and a better and stable world. Also, happy Halloween. Yeah, that's tomorrow. Thank you so much, Mr. Zoltak. I appreciate that. There you go. You got an alumni coming in to
go Rams.
Mo money just because of you. Hey, you get the easy one. You just got to say a name.
9.99 from LA Silver Surfers. I can read.
Surfers. See, you only had to say a name. You couldn't talk to that one right. See, that's why PhD stands for piled high and deep. No, I remember I was talking to Randy. Let me just name drop the amazing Randy. But again, for the show, I remember we had a conversation, but it was based on something he had said about PhDs in particular, because Randy also didn't have a PhD, but would frequently debate people with doctorates. And he was pointing out that it is a demonstration that you did the work and absolutely nothing else. It doesn't show what you know, what you retained, or how right you are about anything else. And so while he had massive respect for people who genuinely knew and understood the things that he didn't and that I don't, I had a terrible fear of how am I going to debate someone with a PhD when I don't even have an hour's credit. And I told him the story. I love listening to him laugh, but I told him the story of how we used to have the Thursday night kind of skeptics in the pub store thing. And I showed up at an event, and there was a guy who was a PhD candidate in, I think, statistics. I think I might be confusing the field, but a PhD candidate in, I think, statistics. And he sat down to argue with me because his case was, since you will either win the lottery or you won't, that therefore your odds of winning the lottery were 50%. And believe it or not, I had to sit here and argue for quite a while with this PhD candidate to explain just how mind-numbingly stupid that was and how wrong it was. And that made it so I had no more fears of engaging with someone who was better credentialed than me.
Yeah, that's a fair
$20.
point. I think
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, obviously proud of the PhD. And I think that, I think there's a level of being able to say, oh, you got a PhD in something, you know about that specific thing, but it's not guarantee. It's an indicator, but you got to have a conversation with people first. Yeah. And also, I think a lot of people with a PhD think that now they're an expert on everything rather than in the thing that they focused on. And that's not always.
And that's clearly wrong, because I don't have a PhD and I am an expert on everything. So see? $20 from Kia Star 67. Thanks for helping people figure out who to vote for and to vote in general. Also, getting rid of Imperia's helped everyone's blood pressure. Fair.
All right, $19.99 from Carla J. For all you do to help keep us sane and keep making good trouble in solidarity. 3 blue hearts.
Thank you so much, Carla. $10 from Monkey to Typewriter. Thank you, Dr. Lee. And let me also extend that. By the way, Dr. Lee's been on before, just not with me. You did the show with Dave Warnock, right?
Yes.
And so all you people, can't you see? Can't you? Never mind. All of you enjoyed Dr. Lee's visit and want to see her come back to talk more about the SSA and talk potentially about her work and other things. By all means, make sure you comment below after the show is there, so the comment lives forever. But you can also reach out to us. I wish I'd have put up hey, we could put up a poll. No, whatever. I'd love to get you back on some other time to talk about more stuff and to talk when I can just be quiet. And actually, I know some people that I'd like to see. I know who I think you would be a good show partner for taking calls like on a Sunday show or whatever afterwards, but we can get some SSA stuff going. But yes, I agree with Monkey, a typewriter. Also, Monkey's in the deeply pessimistic camp. I think Trump likely wins and takes the Senate too, but fuck, I hope I'm wrong. Voted Harris. Yeah, I'm there with you exactly.
Right, $10 from Blackwater Ted. If Com wins, do you think we'll see a similar January 6th event from the right? Yes.
Yes.
We just talked about this. I think it's really challenging with elections because there's a lot of research that shows that the losing side always believes that the other side cheated. Doesn't matter about party. Democrats do this too. But one of the big challenges with Trump is that he promotes this idea so heavily that it goes beyond just, we should have healthy conversations about election processes, to creating this narrative early on that says if Democrats win, it's proof they cheated. And because he will not give a concession speech, and he's made it clear he won't, I think he's going to really rile things up. I also happen to know somebody who went to a rally where at it they said that if Trump loses, we will learn that January 6th was a practice run, which is a very scary thing for someone to say at a rally. But
so only one of the two candidates. Only one of the two candidates. Do we have an audio recording of them attempting to rig an election that they lost? So, yeah. The sides aren't equal in any respect. Another $10 for Monkey Typewriter. Remember, this year we're doing the election a little different. Anyone voting for Harris, vote Tuesday. If you're voting for anyone else, you vote Wednesday. Make sure to tell your crazier relatives. As funny as that is, I do not want to be in any trouble for giving people misleading information about the election, which is why if somebody calls in and says, hey, my number one issue is I hate trans people and I don't want anyone who's pregnant to ever get an abortion, my answer to them is you should vote for Trump. And then you need to go seriously reevaluate your life and your thoughts and why you are so disrespectful of other people's autonomy and individualness. But yes, I'll tell them who they're supposed to vote for. So everybody votes on Tuesday or before. Get your mail-in ballots done, go vote early, and then you won't have any problem with it. Well, you get another shot at just saying the same name.
All right, let's see if I can do this. 9.99 from LA Silver Surfers. Hey.
Hey, look. My shaming people results in another $50 donation. Thank you so much, Red Trek. Just for that, Red Trek, you get one free super chat on me. Next time you want to say something, if you don't feel like donating, you can just tag me in it, send me a message, and I'll read it for you. And to follow it up with the final one for tonight, $10 from Mike Quad. Just because you begged for it, Matt. Also, have you seen and do you have thoughts on the anime chibi mascots the Vatican introduced on Monday? I did not read much about the story. I did see the cute little, I guess is anime chibi, right? I don't know.
I have not seen anything.
Chibi is like anime, but they're like baby proportions on an adult character, so they look really cute. They got like big eyes and big head and kind of a small body.
I think it'll be really useful for them to say, show me on the doll where the priest touched you. I think it's nice that they're bringing their own dolls to their depositions. I don't understand it. I didn't read an article on it. I just saw a picture, and I'm going to make I've already made the obvious joke, but I haven't looked into it enough to know what the purpose of it is or what benefit it could be, but I am not surprised because Christians have been co-opting secular things forever. They don't care about trademark or copyright. They'll take the Coke logo and change it to Jesus and not care if they're trampling on somebody else's ideas or anything else. I don't have a full schedule of events coming up here on the Line Network, but I can tell you this. Man, I love Wednesdays. You guys make me feel so much better. Even when I'm not in the mood for it. Today, I was definitely in the mood for it huge thank you to you, Dr. Lee. Where should everybody go to find information about the SSA and you that is relevant to all of this?
Yeah, for SSA, you can go to Secular Student Alliance website. If you just search it, it should be the first thing that comes up. And it'll have events that we're doing, any webinars we're hosting, our conference information if you want to donate. And you can donate broadly. You could donate specifically for things like scholarships if that's what you're interested in. If you're interested more about my research, you can check out my profile at the University of South Dakota's website. We also, I mentioned we're having a big fundraiser on November 16th, which we'll be sharing more information about. You can check our social medias, and I know that Jimmy, he's the one who's hosting it, so he'll be sharing some stuff on that as well. So mark November 16th into your calendars and keep an eye out for that information. You'll just learn more about SSA, hear from more people, including our director, for example, and get a chance to support us, which is always helpful. Again, it goes towards creating chapters, help financially supporting our students. A lot of our students, their families aren't financially supporting them because of their atheist identity. So we want to make sure our students are staying in school, especially with how expensive college is. Yeah.
And we don't know what the future is going to hold. There's an election coming up on Tuesday. If you haven't voted already and you're eligible to vote, make sure that you vote before Tuesday. If you're not eligible to vote, or you should be, if you're eligible and you haven't registered, reach out, because there are still options, I think, for some of you, depending on where you're located. But once upon a time, I would say, irrespective of who you vote for, get out and vote. I'm not saying that this time. Vote correctly. Vote for the better world. Consider the people around you. Consider you. If you are in such a privileged position that you think you can afford 4 years of Trump and you're trying to burn it down, none of that's going to work. So why not vote for the people you love? If you're the father of a trans person and you live in an incredibly blue state and you decide to throw away your vote by voting for the person who wants to destroy your daughter's life, you're not being a good person. You're not being a good Republican. You're not being a good voter. You're not being a good father. Think about the people who aren't going to be all right for 4 years, for 8 years. Think about the people who aren't going to be right on day one. Think about the people who can't make the change on their own and need your help. Get out and do what you're supposed to do, which is work with all the rest of us to make the world a better place. On that note, thanks for everybody for joining us today. Thank you to our call screener. Thanks to our moderators and the lovely and talented Arden Hart down the hall producing the show. Do not forget to tune in to the Transatlantic Call-In Show tomorrow at 2 o'clock, where Arden and Josie will be here to talk more about trans rights, trans issues, and the election. You can go to linemerch.com to buy stuff, and you should. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and for donating. Patreon.com/calltheline for more about our organization and to help out. Take care.